Chapter 667. Seeing that Tang Zheng was not afraid at all, the Sky Emperor's face turned ashen, knowing that he was doomed. Kill! Tang Zheng mechanically waved his war soul sword, taking away one life after another. But the number of enemies kept increasing, and he could not kill them all. His body was also covered in blood, and blood dripped down his clothes to the ground, leaving behind a long trail of blood. Suddenly, a flame lit up in the distance. The flames soared into the sky, even covering the scorching sun in the sky. Thick smoke rose into the air, and many people turned their heads to look. "It's on fire! Quickly put out the fire!" The imperial palace was an ancient building. Most of it was made of bricks and wood, and many of the buildings were connected to each other. As long as one place was on fire, the other places would quickly be affected. Therefore, many people turn around and rush towards the fire to put out the fire. Another place is on fire. Screams rose one after another, and flames rose into the air from different places one after another. Thick smoke billowed, enveloping the imperial palace. Arson. The smart people immediately realized this. If it wasn't arson, then there definitely wouldn't be so many places that caught fire one after another. Li Xiaotian frowned. Looking at the flames in the sky, he exclaimed, luring the tiger away from the mountain. Someone came to save him. "Marshal, it must be that woman. She is too daring to take such a risk for Tang Zheng. She really doesn't want to live anymore." Her expression changed greatly. She did not expect this. She had schemed for a long time, but in the end she had missed this point. In fact, although she knew that Marshal's cultivation was higher than her own, she was not really afraid of Marshal, because she knew that many times Marshal's strength did not represent everything, and schemes were often more useful than Marshal's strength. She originally thought that in the depths of the palace, with Marshal's strength, no matter what, he would not be able to stir up any waves, much less give Tang Zheng much help. But she never thought that Marshal would actually use this move. This move could be said to have hit his weak spot. The Kokyo was like the emperor. It was the symbol of the power of the island nation. It was also a belief and perseverance in the hearts of the people. If the Kokyo was burned down, it would definitely cause a strong reaction among the people and shake their beliefs. Emperors could be passed down from generation to generation, but the Kokyo could not be replicated. If it was destroyed by fire, even if it was rebuilt, it would be difficult to rebuild the faith of the people. Li Xiaotian didn't understand this, which was why she miscalculated. With someone going to put out the fire, the pressure on Tang Zheng was greatly reduced. His counterattacks became stronger and stronger, and his advancing speed became faster and faster. The enemy retreated in defeat, and their momentum instantly weakened. His aura immediately surged, and the flames of despair once again ignited in his heart. His eyes lit up as he looked in the direction of the flames. Who set the fire? For a moment, he couldn't figure out. Suddenly, whoosh, a beam of white light shot out from the direction of the fire. Wherever it passed, it immediately turned into a sea of fire. "Xiaobai!" Tang Zheng exclaimed. The fire was actually set by Xiaobai. Yesterday, he was still thinking that if he set the Kokyo on fire, it would definitely be very refreshing. He didn't expect that this little fellow would know his thoughts and actually do it. Not good. Suddenly, his brows trembled as he realized another point. Xiaobai is by Marshal's side. If it came to set the fire, then, with Marshal's temper, it would definitely come. Didn't I repeatedly warn you not to let her get involved? I told her to run away as soon as she saw any movement. This foolish woman, she actually rushed in without caring about anything. Sigh. He had 1,000 thoughts running through his mind. For a moment, he didn't know whether to criticize Marshal or praise him. The more critical the moment of life and death, the more one could see a person clearly. As the saying goes, a friend in need is a friend indeed. For Marshal to be able to overcome the difficulties and come to save him without hesitation, this already explained everything. Although he wanted to blame him, he couldn't say it out loud. Sure enough, not far behind Xiaobai, there was a tall and beautiful figure. She was like a phoenix bathed in fire, so bright that no one could look straight at her. Li Xiaotian also saw Marshall. His eyes immediately emitted a cold gaze and shouted, "Stop her!" Someone immediately went forward to intercept Marshall, but Xiao Bai was like a warrior. She opened her small mouth, and monstrous flames spewed out from her small mouth, turning the world in front of her into a sea of fire. The enemy immediately turned into a flaming man, screaming miserably as he rolled on the ground. Marshall quickly passed by these people and came to Tang Zheng's side. Looking at the wounds and blood on Tang Zheng's body, her face became very ugly, and she asked with concern, "How are you?" Tang Zheng grinned and revealed a carefree smile and said, "I won't die. Why are you here? If I don't come, what will you do? I can't let you be trapped here alone, but I can't escape." Marshall said resolutely, "Doesn't this mean that both of them are trapped?" That's better than being trapped alone," Marshall said disapprovingly. He turned his gaze and saw Li Xiaotian hiding behind the crowd. His gaze turned cold as he said, "Did she betray you?" Tang Zheng also looked at Li Xiaotian and laughed bitterly. "This is all her trap. I trusted her. This is my own fault. I already said that her words can't be trusted. Yeah, I should have listened to you long ago." Marshall was slightly startled. He looked at Tang Zheng with a complicated expression and said, "It's not too late now. Who is this?" "The Sky Emperor, my captive." Marshall was not frightened by the identity of the Sky Emperor. Instead, he was beaming with joy and said, "It's good that we caught him. The whereabouts of Master and Mistress are confirmed." Tang Zheng wanted to explain the matter of the Imperial Advisor to her, but this was not the right time, so he chose to remain silent. Xiao Bai jumped onto Tang Zheng's body, scratched his hair, and bared his teeth as he pointed at the flames in all directions, as if he was asking for credit. Tang Zheng laughed involuntarily and said, "I know that all of this is thanks to you. Xiao Bai is the strongest." Xiao Bai was like a child being praised by his parents. He was so excited that he danced with joy, looking comical and cute. The flames around them were gradually extinguished, and the enemies surrounded them once again. "Marshall, take him with you. I'll deal with these people," Tang Zheng said. Marshall did not argue and took over the Sky Emperor. Tang Zheng took the lead and stood proudly. The War Soul sword in his hand disappeared and was replaced by the heaven-shocking bow and the shooting sun arrows. When Li Xiaotian saw the two weapons, his eyes immediately blossomed with a blazing light. His palms itched, and he wished that he could immediately rush up and take the two divine weapons for himself. But she knew that the moment Tang Zheng pulled open the heaven-shocking bow, its attack power was even more terrifying than the War Soul sword. Thus, she decisively floated backwards without the slightest hesitation. This was Li Xiaotian. He judged the situation, made a prompt decision, and did not hesitate. His temperament had been cultivated to the point where he was almost emotionless. This was the outstanding trait of the Holy Maiden of Li Palace. This was the trait that the person who had experienced countless eliminations and finally sat on the Holy Maiden's throne should have. However, the other island nation people did not have Li Xiaotian's trait. Seeing that the flames were extinguished, they crazily launched another attack. Wong! Tang Zheng gently released his fingers, the bowstring trembled, and the shooting sun arrow turned into a ray of light and shot out. Whiz! To Tang Zheng, the sharp sound of something tearing through the air was like heavenly music from the nine heavens. He could hear it to the extreme, but to the enemy, it was a death sentence. Wherever the shooting sun arrow passed, the air would tremble, and the people of the island nation would be unable to move, as they were enveloped by the powerful aura of the shooting sun arrow. Boom! 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 The shooting sun arrow pierced through the chest of the first island nation person, then the second, the third, the fourth. The shooting sun arrow continued forward as if there was no end to it. A series of island nation people fell to the ground. Seeing that, the others subconsciously retreated in fear. What kind of arrow was this? How could it be so terrifying? For an ordinary archer, it was already very powerful for an arrow to pierce through two people. However, this arrow seemed to have no time to exhaust its strength. It was unheard of, unseen, and too terrifying. "Let's go." Tang Zheng took advantage of the enemy's distraction and whispered, then took the lead and rushed out. With the shooting sun arrow paving this bloody path, it could be said to be unstoppable and unobstructed. No one could stop them. In an instant, they arrived at the last door of the imperial palace. After passing through this door, they would be able to disappear into the bustling streets. Even if the enemy wanted to chase after them, it would be extremely difficult. "Hold on, it's the last step," Tang Zheng encouraged. Wu nodded heavily, his eyes resolute. The Sky Emperor was truly in despair. He lived in the depths of the palace and never thought that he would be kidnapped. This was something that had never happened in thousands of years. This was a huge humiliation to the royal family. If it happened to him, he would probably have to commit suicide and use his death to apologize to his ancestors and citizens. The enemy finally knew that this was the last barrier. Although they were intimidated by the terrifying power of the shooting sun arrow, they still chased after them like a tide. Tang Zheng had already picked up the shooting sun arrow and placed it back on the heaven-shocking bow. The tip of the arrow was aimed in one direction, and the people there would subconsciously scatter to the sides like a tide. It was obvious that even though they were determined to die, they would still feel an instinctive fear and tremble in the face of such a divine weapon. Since you're courting death, I'll fulfill your wish." Seeing that there was still a group of people at the entrance who were unafraid of death, Tang Zheng did not hesitate anymore, and the shooting sun arrow left the bow once again. Boom! After killing everyone, the shooting sun arrow struck the door. The thick and heavy pure wood door exploded into a pile of dust. The door had already disappeared without a trace, and the road ahead was unobstructed. "Let's go." Tang Zheng and the others immediately rushed out of the door. In front of them was a bustling street filled with traffic. Many people had already stopped to look at the imperial palace, not knowing what had happened. When they saw Tang Zheng and the others rushing out, they all covered their mouths and cried out in alarm. These were all ordinary people and were no longer a threat to Tang Zheng. Naturally, he would not kill any more people and was prepared to turn into the street beside him and disappear without a trace. But the heavens did not go as he wished. This was also why she was so surprised when she heard Wu Junshan mention Wu Junshan and the others. It was because she truly did not know about this matter. After Wu Junshan and the others left the martial sect, their whereabouts were very strange. Li Xiaotian was also curious and wanted to investigate, but there was very little information in this area. She wanted to do it, but she was powerless. But now, from the little clues, she gradually made her own judgment. Thinking of Wu Junshan, the dispirited look in her eyes gradually disappeared. Her eyes became bright, and her heart couldn't help but beat faster. Wu Junshan, if I really find him, or even catch him, it will definitely be a rich and colorful stroke in my life. In the Jianghu, the Li Palace's position will rise to another level, completely surpassing the martial organization and even comparable to the mysterious Azure Dragon Hall. This thought made her palpitate with excitement. Not only would this benefit the Li Palace, it would also benefit her. Although she was the holy maiden of the Li Palace and the future successor of the Li Palace Master, she was still young. Without enough achievements and qualifications, even if she inherited the position of Palace Master in the future, it would be difficult to convince the masses. Without a doubt, the merit of capturing Wu Junshan would solve all her problems and shut the mouths of others. "You are the holy maiden of the Li Palace, Li Xiaotian?" Suddenly, a voice broke her reverie. She unhappily raised her head and frowned at the person who came. This was a woman. To be exact, it was a beautiful woman, a woman who didn't lose to her. This wasn't just referring to appearance and temperament, but more importantly, strength. For a woman of similar age to her to have such strength, she could be said to be a dragon among men. "Who are you?" Li Xiaotian smiled, the displeasure and hostility in her heart quickly disappearing without a trace, replaced by a bewitching smile. The person who came was as stiff as a statue, rigidly saying, "The Imperial Tutor invites you." She didn't answer Li Xiaoyan's question, but the two words Imperial Tutor completely attracted Li Xiaoyan's attention, causing her to temporarily ignore this question. "You are from the Imperial Tutor's residence?" Li Xiaoyan asked in surprise. The Imperial Tutor's residence was one of the most mysterious places in the island nation. Its degree of mystery far surpassed that of the Imperial Palace. In fact, the Imperial Palace was not mysterious to the masses. It was in the eyes of the masses. Even if outsiders couldn't enter the depths of the palace, it had been there for thousands of years, and the masses had accumulated a lot of understanding of it. On the other hand, the Imperial Tutor's residence was a name that the masses had never heard of, just like the three great organizations of Huaxia, which the average person had never heard of. The Imperial Tutor's residence was as mysterious as the Azure Dragon Palace. Everyone had only heard of its name, and no one had ever mentioned to outsiders what kind of existence it was. Those who could enter and leave the Imperial Tutor's residence were all tight-lipped, and there was even a saying that disaster came from the mouth. The Li Palace's intelligence network was spread all over the world, but even they knew a little about the Imperial Tutor's residence. But one thing was certain: the Imperial Tutor's residence was the Imperial Tutor's residence, the place where he trained his disciples and subordinates. It was one of the most dangerous places in the island nation, far more dangerous than the Imperial Palace. Since the Imperial Tutor invited her, Li Xiaoyan naturally wouldn't refuse and was even somewhat excited. She could finally touch upon this place that others couldn't understand. Of course, as the fearless holy maiden of the Li Palace, even though the Imperial Tutor's residence was very mysterious and the Imperial Tutor was very powerful, she still wouldn't feel any fear. Hearing Li Xiaoyan's question, the person meticulously replied, "Yes." Li Xiaoyan curled her lips and said, "Do you only know these few words?" The person acted as if she hadn't heard and turned to leave. "She has even more of a temper than I do." Li Xiaoyan helplessly rolled her eyes and then confidently followed. Before leaving the Imperial Palace, she couldn't help but turn her head to take a look. The Imperial Palace was still burning, but much of it had been extinguished. But under the thick smoke, the Imperial Palace was in a mess, almost completely destroyed. This ancient building that had stood for thousands of years had been destroyed in a single day by Tang Zheng. What a troublemaker. First the warship, then the Imperial Palace. He really wants to turn this country upside down. The people of the island nation are probably on the verge of crying. Although she said this, the corners of her mouth couldn't help but curl into a smile. It was obvious that in the depths of her heart, she really didn't have a good impression of this country. On this point, she didn't lie to Tang Zheng. Li Xiaoyan was proud by nature, and this pride was also expressed in her attitude towards this small country. Although the island nation had no lack of experts, she believed from the bottom of her heart that the island nation was far inferior to Huaxia. Li Xiaoyan wasn't wrong. The people of the island nation were indeed on the verge of crying. The Li Palace was a kind of belief in their hearts. With the Li Palace destroyed, their belief was on the verge of collapse. This kind of despair and grief was unimaginable. The whole country fell into deep pain, as if they had experienced a national disaster. The people walked onto the streets and gathered at the Imperial Palace, wanting to see what had become of the Imperial Palace. When they saw the mess of the Imperial Palace, many people knelt in front of the Imperial Palace and cried bitterly. They were sadder than if their parents had died. The internet was immediately filled with pictures of the Imperial Palace's current situation, which were transmitted to every corner of the world. The island nation had already announced to the outside world that this was a kind of crazy terrorist attack. The island nation would definitely carry out a fatal revenge attack against the initiator of this. The governments of various countries spoke out one after another to condemn this kind of terrorist act, but the people of many countries were secretly happy. 100 years ago, the island nation's invasion of the outside world had indeed attracted too much hatred for their own country. Some of their actions had even deviated from the values of the general public, such as the crazy actions of hunting whales every year. This time, the island nation had really lost face, and it had been completely disgraced. The people of the world saw it as a big joke. The people of the island nation marched on the streets, condemning the government's inaction. They wanted the people in power to step down, and they even apologized with death. The whole country gradually fell into chaos. However, all of this didn't end because, whether it was intentional or not, the government concealed the news of the emperor's abduction. The ordinary people only knew that the imperial palace had been destroyed. The government's plan was clear in the eyes of all the observant people. If the public knew that the emperor had been captured, it would cause even more turmoil and chaos. This was one of the things that the island nation government was most afraid of. The island nation government's wishful thinking was very good, but there was no such thing as an airtight wall in the world. A few days after the incident, the news of the emperor being abducted gradually appeared on the internet, and there was no trace of him. In the beginning, not many people believed this news. They thought that some people with ulterior motives wanted to stir up trouble and take advantage of the situation. However, to the public's surprise, the news quickly spread like wildfire, not only on the internet, but also in real life. Moreover, the details of the incident were described in great detail, as if they had personally experienced it. If the other party was making it up, it definitely wouldn't be so realistic. Therefore, all of this could be true. This really caused an uproar. The people of the island nation went crazy. They rushed onto the streets and attacked the government. They wanted the government to give them an explanation, or let the emperor appear to give them an explanation. Then, this rumor would naturally collapse and disappear without a trace. However, things didn't develop as the people expected. Instead, it developed in a direction that they were very afraid of. The government dragged it out again and again, only comforting them. However, the emperor still didn't appear, causing the people to panic more and more. Gradually, everyone believed this matter. The emperor was really captured. This time, not only the island nation, but the whole world once again paid attention to this. This was the ruler of a country, the leader of a country, being captured in his own palace. This was simply a great humiliation. National disaster. This was a real national disaster. The people of the island nation didn't feel like their parents had died. Instead, it felt like their entire family had died. Many people had completely collapsed. They sat outside the ruins of the imperial palace all day long, like walking corpses. Chapter 669. The instigators of all of this, Tang Zheng and Marshall, seemed to have disappeared without a trace. The island nation used all of its resources to find the three of them, but found that it was all in vain. The bustling Tokyo was a tourist paradise. Every year, it would receive a large number of tourists from all over the world. Due to historical reasons, the people of the Western Empire enjoyed treatment that citizens of other countries could not compare to in the island nation. At the entrance of a 5-star luxurious hotel, a Westerner swaggered into the hotel. The doorman respectfully greeted him. This was already a regular customer. He had been staying in the hotel for the past few days. Even the doorman remembered this face. The Westerner arrogantly nodded, as if he did not see the doorman's greeting. The doorman kept smiling as he watched the Westerner walk into the hotel. The Westerner sat in the electric hall and arrived at the luxurious suite on the upper floor. After the door opened, a face appeared behind the door. It was a Chinese face. If Li Xiaodian was here, he would definitely be unable to help but exclaim a name, Marshall. The person at the door was the Marshall that the island nation had racked their brains to find. It was as if Marshall had disappeared from the face of the earth. She actually swaggered into the most prosperous 5-star hotel in Tokyo. No one would have thought that she would be so bold, and no one would have expected that she would be able to escape layers upon layers of searches and surveillance. Of course, more people would be curious. How did she do it? Who was this Westerner? The Westerner asked, "How is he?" It was actually Huaxia language, and it was very pure. Marshall nodded and said, "Just now, he was a little restless and wanted to escape. After I took care of him, he became obedient again." The Westerner sneered and said, "He has already escaped so many times, but he still hasn't given up. After all, he is the emperor. His temperament is far more resolute than ordinary people. Marshall said, "Fine, then let him escape. He will eventually despair." The Westerner shrugged indifferently and said, "How is it outside?" Marshall asked. The Westerner chuckled. "It's getting more and more chaotic outside. I really didn't expect that this time I would accidentally cause such a big mess. It's enough for the people of the island nation to drink a pot." Wu said meaningfully, "It's not just a pot. I saw the reports on TV. This country is almost in chaos. This is just a facade. The island nation is not damaged at all. Given time, they will rise again. It's just like when they were bombed by the Western Empire's atomic bomb. The whole country mourned, but it didn't take them many years to rise again, even faster than the Huaxia. There are many qualities in this nation that are worth learning and thinking about." The Westerner shook his head and sighed. After a short pause, he sighed. "Huaxia has a deep foundation and too many unique advantages. But because of this, they're often not good at cherishing and reflecting. So, in fact, there are many aspects of the island nation that we can learn from." Wu was obviously not interested in this question and changed the topic. "What should we do next? We can't stay in a hotel forever, right?" "Of course not," the Westerner said mysteriously. "During this period of time, I've been quietly observing the changes. Although the island nation is in chaos, our goal is to save your master and the others. So, the key is to find their whereabouts. According to the Emperor, only the Imperial Advisor knows the whole story. But the result of my inquiries over the past few days is that there is no such person. Ordinary people don't even know of his existence." Wu was not surprised and said, "In Huaxia, ordinary people are not aware of the existence of the three major organizations. This situation is similar in every country." The Westerner nodded and continued, "The Emperor is unwilling to speak. We also don't know where the Imperial Advisor is. So, all of this has temporarily reached a dead end. Don't you know the soul search technique? If we use the soul-searching technique on him once, wouldn't everything be solved?" Wu suggested. The Westerner shook his head and smiled bitterly. "He is still useful to me. This method won't work for the time being. We can only think of another plan." After saying that, he lowered his head and pondered. Wu was helpless and silently walked away. He walked into a room and saw a person lying on the bed. He did not move at all, but his eyes kept rolling around. No one knew what he was thinking. This person was the Emperor who had been abducted. "Your acupuncture points have been sealed by me. Don't even think about escaping." Wu sat on a chair at the door and said coldly, "Got it." Suddenly, the Westerner cried out in surprise and shot up from his chair with a whoosh. He stared straight at him and asked, "What can we do?" "National Security Bureau." The Westerner snapped his fingers and said, "National Security Bureau?" Wu repeated curiously, "What can the Dragon Group do to help? Don't you remember the island nation's royal family that I caught in the Changbai Mountains? He is the Emperor's younger brother and was later handed over to the National Security Bureau, Su Ingtian. The National Security Bureau's understanding of the island nation is not just a year or so. They definitely have a lot of information that I don't know. Perhaps the Imperial Advisor is one of them." Wu rolled his eyes and thought that it was feasible. He said, "You are for the National Security Bureau, so you could try this method. But let me tell you, the Emperor must not be handed over to the National Security Bureau." So, this Westerner was actually Tang Zhong. He deliberately used an illusion technique to transform himself into a Westerner and swaggered into the hotel. No one would have thought that he had such a trick up his sleeve. He was right under the noses of the Japanese. He was truly a black sheep under the lamp. Haha, even if I hand it over to them, they wouldn't dare to accept it. This is a hot potato. If the National Security Bureau were to accept it, it would be an act of the country. It would lead to international disputes and war. Tang Zhong laughed loudly. Only then did Wu relax. The Emperor was related to the safety of her master and the others. Even if it was a country, she would not easily give it up. Tang Zhong took out a satellite phone from his Sumera bag and dialed Su Ingtian's number. After a few rings, Su Ingtian's familiar voice rang out. "Who is it?" "Me." Tang Zhong said a simple word. Su Ingtian immediately recognized his voice and said in surprise, "Ha, So it's you, brat. You slipped away again. Didn't I ask you to take care of Princess? And I told you to protect her safety. So why did you run away without saying a word? You didn't even say a word. Could it be that Princess and is really that terrifying that you want to avoid her? Speaking of this mission, Su Ying-tian was really depressed. Other people would fight to the death for this mission, but this brat wanted to hide far away. It was too abnormal. This made him, an old man in his 40s, unable to figure out what Tang Zheng was thinking. How much danger can she be in the country? Moreover, with your secret protection, nothing will happen. Tang Zheng explained. Su Ying-tian chuckled and said, speaking of chaos, the island nation has been really exciting recently. You know that there's a big mess, right? Island nation has done so many bad things to me. Huaxia. A while ago, they even sent people to assassinate Princess and frame our country. I don't know which fierce person it is, but if I meet him, I will definitely treat him to a few drinks and properly thank him. He didn't expect Su Ying-tian to take the initiative to change the topic. Tang Zheng said embarrassedly, I came to find you today for this matter. For this matter. Wait a minute, Tang Zheng, where are you now? Su Ying-tian reacted, as if he had realized something, and asked nervously. I'm in the island nation. F***CK. Su Ying-tian couldn't help but curse. His breathing also couldn't help but quicken as he asked, Don't tell me that fierce person is you? Tang Zheng said embarrassedly. You guessed right. Silence. Su Ying-tian was completely silent. Only the sound of heavy breathing could be heard from the phone. Su Ying-tian knew that Tang Zheng's courage was big and his ability was not small, but he never would have thought that he would dare to single-handedly break into a country, destroy the imperial palace that had been passed down for thousands of years, and even kidnap the ruler of a country. There wasn't such a fierce person in the movies. Before Su Ying-tian could react, Tang Zheng dryly coughed and reminded him, You are the director of the National Security Bureau. What kind of battle have you not seen? Why do you look like you haven't seen the world? F***CK. Su Ying-tian cursed again and said angrily, Do you think that the director of the National Security Bureau is omnipotent? As far as I know, there is an upper limit to the strength of the people I know, but you seem to have no upper limit. Every time you dare to do something shocking. Do you think that everyone's hearts are too strong, so you're deliberately testing everyone? Su Ying-tian didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He really was someone who had seen great battles, but he couldn't withstand Tang Zheng's frightening torment. Su Ying-tian took a few deep breaths, suppressed the shock in his heart, and asked curiously, How did the island nation provoke you this time? Why are you so fierce? This is a secret for now, but I can tell you one more thing. The sinking of the warship a while ago was also caused by me. Tang Zheng simply told him everything at once. Hiss. Su Ying-tian's gasp could be heard from the phone. My heart can't take it. I don't want to talk to you anymore. You really want to scare me to death. Su Ying-tian patted his chest and said with lingering fear, Do you know how serious the warship incident was a while ago? The island nation was certain that our Huaxia was the one who did it. After all, the two countries are old enemies. Because of this, the two countries went to war. I didn't think that they wouldn't blame us. This was really done by our people. If the other side knew that you were from the National Security Bureau, then I'm afraid it would really cause a war between the two countries. Su Ying-tian rubbed his eyebrows. In the past, he was very lucky to have recruited Tang Zheng, but now it seemed that this might not be a lucky thing. He was simply a ticking time bomb. He didn't know when it would explode, but it would implicate the National Security Bureau and even the entire country. Of course, this was only the worst-case scenario. Su Ying-tian and Tang Zheng's relationship was already unusual, so he wouldn't burn the bridge after crossing it. Su Ying-tian really had a headache. After a while, he said, Is the emperor still in your hands? Of course, he's next door. Just now, he tried his best to escape, but we stopped him. Chapter 670. Su Ying-tian could not think of anyone who would be as daring as Tang Zheng. Such a daring person was rarely seen in the world, treating all power and prestige as child's play. Marshal, Tang Zheng replied. Su Yingtian was slightly startled. A tall figure and a cold and beautiful face immediately appeared in his mind. So it's her. Although it was unexpected, everything was within his expectations. In this world, only Marshall would accompany Tang Zheng in his unbridled madness. All right, then let's talk about the reason for your call. Su Yingtian took a deep breath and asked, "What do you know about the island nation's imperial tutor?" Tang Zheng asked directly. Island nation's imperial tutor? Su Yingtian's voice slightly changed. Why did you think of asking him? Tang Zheng heard this, and his heart moved. Since Su Yingtian said this, it meant that he definitely knew something. So he said, "I am looking for him to ask about an important matter." "What is it?" Su Yingtian said. Since it was related to Marshall Monarch Mountain, Tang Zheng did not want to make it public. So he said, "It's not convenient to say the specific reason, but this time I want to ask you for a favor." At this point, Su Yingtian cleverly chose not to ask any more questions and directly said, "The Imperial Tutor is a special existence in the island nation, and this name has been passed down for a long time. It does not belong to any one person, but belongs to the Imperial Tutor Manor. Every generation of the Imperial Tutor Manor's master will inherit the title of Imperial Tutor. Of course, the Imperial Tutor is too mysterious. Most people, and even many martial artists, do not know of his existence. The Imperial Tutor Manor and the Imperial family complement each other. Many times, the Imperial family has to humbly ask for advice or help from the Imperial Tutor Manor. The Imperial Tutor Manor does not take orders from the Imperial family, so the two are on equal footing." Tang Zheng was surprised. Su Yingtian actually knew so much about the Imperial Tutor, especially the existence of the Imperial Tutor's residence. Tang Zheng was very surprised. Island Nation actually had such a mysterious organization, just like the Azure Dragon Palace in Huaxia. Of course, there was a difference between the Imperial Advisor's residence and the Azure Dragon Palace. This was because there was no news of the Azure Dragon Palace influencing the political situation of the country. However, the Imperial Advisor's residence had such a strong influence on the royal family. Perhaps this was the result of the difference between the two countries' national conditions. Now that you've captured the Heavenly Emperor, the Imperial Advisor's residence will definitely not sit idly by. Su Yingtian added. Tang Zheng frowned and said, "That's exactly what I wanted. I wanted to find the Imperial Advisor's residence, but they didn't respond at all." Now that the island nation is in such a big mess, the Imperial Advisor's residence didn't even let out a fart. The Imperial Advisor's residence is a hidden line, so of course they won't surface so easily. I dare to conclude that they're definitely looking for you everywhere. Su Yingtian retorted. Tang Zheng muttered to himself for a moment, then said, "Then wouldn't I have to purposely leak my whereabouts? Speaking of which, I really admire you. I really don't know how you escaped the other party's inescapable net." Su Yingtian sighed. This kind of skill was simply heaven-defying. Even though he was experienced and knowledgeable, he never thought that Tang Zheng would use illusion techniques to change his appearance and deceive the world. If you want the Imperial Advisor's residence to find you, then you must be fully prepared beforehand, because what awaits you will definitely be a fatal attack like a storm. Su Yingtian warned. Understood. Tang Zheng understood clearly. Let me ask again, what is the Imperial Advisor's realm? Of course he is in the Master Realm. As for the level of the Master Realm, there is no accurate information on this, but one thing is certain, the Imperial Advisors of the past generations are the #1 masters of the island nation. Su Yingtian said in a deep voice. Tang Zheng's head slightly sank, and he felt that this matter was getting more and more troublesome. However, even if it was troublesome, he still had to deal with it. He couldn't give up halfway. You don't want to say what is the reason for such a big mess, but I still want to tell you, take care of yourself. Where there is life, there is hope. Everything must be done with the premise of protecting your life. You have great potential for development, so you can't let anything happen to you in a foreign country. Su Yingtian advised earnestly. Although Tang Zheng had caused such a big disturbance, he still cared about him from the bottom of his heart. Thank you. Tang Zheng could feel his sincerity. If my special identity brings any adverse effects to you or the country, you have to bear with it. Tang Jing knew very well that his identity was too special. He was a Huaxia person and also a member of the National Security Bureau, which meant that he had an official background. In the island nation, he had attacked the warship, kidnapped the emperor, and destroyed the imperial palace. No matter what it was shocking enough to make the island nation gnash their teeth. If the island nation investigated Huaxia's officials, Huaxia would indeed be in a passive situation. Su Yingtian understood and said, "Don't worry, I am destined to deal with this kind of situation." Moreover, Huaxia is no longer the weak Huaxia of decades ago. Today, whoever wants to use force against Huaxia will have to think twice before doing so. Hearing this, Tang Jing was slightly relieved. Suddenly, he remembered something and said, Li Palace's holy maiden Li Xiaotian said that the island nation's emperor has a very serious hidden illness. This news is most likely true. Although I have caught the emperor, I have not found out what illness he has. His body is very healthy, even healthier than the average person. It is very strange. Su Yingtian obviously did not know about this news. Hearing this, he was stunned for a moment and said, "You are saying that the island nation's emperor has a hidden illness? I have never heard of this matter. Since you say it is true, I will immediately send people to investigate. If this information is handled properly, it will definitely be of great use." Su Yingtian was pleasantly surprised and continued, "But what does this have to do with Li Xiaotian? Li Xiaotian has come to the island nation. Moreover, there is something fishy between the Li Palace and the island nation's imperial family. You must be careful." Tang Jing also did not understand the relationship between the Li Palace and the island nation's imperial family. But for Li Xiaotian to appear here at this time, it was definitely not normal. Su Yingtian's voice also became low as he said in a serious tone, "Thank you for this news. The three large organizations have always been the main targets of the government. If they are really colluding with the island nation's imperial family to harm the country and its people, we will definitely not sit by and do nothing. This country cannot allow a few organizations to stir up trouble. Also, if you have any further information about the emperor's hidden illness, please immediately inform me." "No problem." Tang Jing hung up the phone and walked in front of the emperor. The emperor's eyes were wide open as he stared straight at Tang Jing. "It's useless for you to stare at me like this. I've always wanted to use you as bait to fish out the imperial tutor, but I didn't expect that we would hide too well, so he couldn't find us. Since that's the case, I'll take the initiative to appear and use you to fish out the big fish," Tang Jing said to the emperor. The emperor said hatefully, "If you dare to have any ideas about the imperial tutor, you will definitely die." "Is that so? Then we'll wait and see." Tang Jing smiled mysteriously and left the room. Wu chased after him and asked in a low voice, "What do you want to do?" "You guys continue to stay in the hotel. I'll take a look around the imperial palace and send them a message. The imperial tutor's mansion will definitely hear the news and move." Tang Jing's eyes flashed with a bright light as he said mysteriously. Wu's heart skipped a beat. He had already guessed his method and warned, "Be careful. I'll wait for you to come back." Without a doubt, Tang Jing going to the imperial palace was a very dangerous action, especially his method. When he arrived outside the imperial palace and saw the combination of light and darkness, he understood that his decision was indeed very risky. However, he had to give it a try even if it was risky. Otherwise, it would be very troublesome for the enemy to not be able to find him. Looking at the messy Kokyo from afar, the corner of Tang Jing's mouth curled up into a smile as he muttered to himself, "Back then, I wanted to burn it. My dream has come true. This scene is truly beautiful." After saying that, he swaggered towards the ruins of the imperial palace. When he walked out of the shadow of the street corner, his face had already undergone a tremendous change. He no longer had the face of a Westerner, but had instead returned to his original appearance. When he walked across the street and arrived in front of the ruins of the imperial palace, the people who were cleaning up the ruins did not notice him. However, Tang Jing already felt that he was being stared at by countless pairs of eyes in an instant. This was like a pack of wolves staring at their prey, and a sense of danger arose spontaneously. He walked in a circle in front of the ruins as if nothing had happened. Then, he turned a corner and walked toward another street. He immediately felt that someone was following him. He did not turn around and calmly strolled down the street. On the bustling street, pedestrians came and went, shuttling back and forth endlessly. Unknowingly, the number of pedestrians on both sides of the street gradually decreased. It turned out that many people had appeared out of nowhere and separated the pedestrians to the side. The area around Tangzhong became a vacuum. The number of pedestrians on the street also decreased as they were being cleared away. Tangzhong saw all of this, but he did not care at all and continued to do his own thing. Suddenly, a group of people walked towards Tangzhong in a fan-shaped formation. Their expressions were solemn, and there were even sparks of hatred flickering in their eyes. Tangzhong smiled faintly and whispered, "Are you finally going to make a move?" The two sides approached each other. Tangzhong was surrounded, and enemies were eyeing him covetously from all directions. Tangzhong stopped, crossed his arms, and said, "Who are the people from the Imperial Advisor's residence?" He believed that the people from the Imperial Advisor's residence must be mixed in with these people. The crowd was silent, and many of them even revealed looks of doubt. It was obvious that to them, the three words Imperial Advisor's residence were also very unfamiliar. Bring a message to the Imperial Advisor. If you want the Sky Emperor to live, then tell me the information I want. As for what information, he should be very clear about it. Otherwise, the situation will continue to worsen. Tangzhong said indifferently. Still, no one answered. The atmosphere was oppressive and austere. "All right, I'm done. I'm leaving." With that, the heaven-shocking bow and the sun-shooting arrow appeared in Tangzhong's hands. Buzz! An arrow flew out, causing the air to surge and blood to splatter everywhere. The people in front of him fell down one after another. Tangzhong shrunk the ground into an inch, followed closely behind the sun-shooting arrow, and quickly passed through the crowd. Before the others could gather, Tangzhong had already rushed out of the encirclement. Chapter 671. Tangzhong rushed out of the encirclement and left the crowd far behind. In the blink of an eye, he disappeared from the street, leaving behind a group of island nation people staring at each other helplessly. Tangzhong had already changed his appearance and blended into the crowd. He walked towards the hotel without leaving a trace. Suddenly, he stopped in his tracks and abruptly turned his head to look behind him. The crowd that was moving like shuttles were all unfamiliar faces, and there was nothing unusual about them. He frowned and muttered in his heart. Why do I feel like someone is following me? With his strength, he was still being silently followed by someone. That person's strength must be very terrifying. Just now, there was no one with a particularly high cultivation in that group. It was easy for me to get rid of them. Why do I feel like I'm being followed? It was precisely because he saw that although the enemy had a lot of people, their individual cultivation was not high. That was why he showed himself without any fear. He had never thought that his flawless plan would also have a mishap. Although he did not see the person following him, he believed in his intuition. He was definitely being followed. Since that was the case, he could not continue to go to the hotel. He quietly turned into another street. The feeling of being followed had not disappeared. 5 because, humph, I want to see who you are. Could it be the state preceptor? He immediately rejected this idea. If the other party was really the state preceptor, he would have already made his move. Why would he need to sneakily follow him? The pedestrians on both sides of the street gradually decreased. The streets became more and more remote. The buildings became lower and lower. The fox has finally revealed his tail. Tangzhong's eyes flashed. Although he did not turn around, he could clearly feel that someone was following him. If not for his superior perception, he would definitely not feel the existence of this person. The other party was like air. Finally, Tangzhong stopped and slowly turned around. The other party did not hide, because this was a very spacious place. There was nowhere to hide. This person looked at Tangzhong calmly. Their eyes met. No one moved. They just looked at each other quietly. Tang Zheng's eyes flashed with surprise. This was another woman, a beautiful woman. Moreover, the expression between her brows was extremely cold. "Are you from the Imperial Advisor's residence?" Tang Zheng broke the silence and asked. "Tang Zheng, you also know ninjutsu." The other party didn't answer the question, but said indifferently. Tang Zheng curled his lips in disdain and said, "Ninjutsu." As soon as he finished speaking, his face changed and returned to his original appearance. "Ninjutsu is just a small trick. Let me tell you, this is Hua Xia's Jinjutsu, the ancestor of ninjutsu." Her face turned ashen as she said, "How dare you? Are all Hua Xia people so arrogant?" Tang Zheng was so angry that he laughed. "You still have the nerve to say that we're arrogant and conceited? I think you're the frogs at the bottom of the well. You think you're the best in the world after learning a little bit of magic? The ignorant are fearless. If it was an ordinary person, they would certainly be in awe of the magic of ninjutsu. But Tang Zheng was a cultivator and had seen too many powerful magic. He knew that Hua Xia's magic was extensive and profound. Island Nation's ninjutsu was not even worthy to carry the shoes of Hua Xia's magic. Island Nation people were wishful thinking that ninjutsu was amazing and treated it as a treasure. In Tang Zheng's eyes, it was ridiculous. "You dare to insult ninjutsu. I promise you, you will see what real ninjutsu is, and in the end, you will die on this land. Is that so? Then I'll wait and see." Tang Zheng shrugged and said disapprovingly. Immediately, the other party was driven mad with anger. "Since you're from the Imperial Advisor's residence, then you're not a nobody. Tell me your name. Otherwise, if you lose your life, you won't have this opportunity." The other party said, "Of course I'm not like you who hides the head and shows the tail. Remember, my name is Junko." Tang Zheng faintly smiled and said, "Your name is quite good. As the saying goes, beautiful women are destined to have a short life." As his voice fell, Tang Zheng walked towards Junko. Just a small step, and he was already in front of Junko. Junko had seen this magical distance shrinking technique before, so she had been waiting for it and was secretly on guard. When Tang Zheng raised his leg, she reacted. Her hands quickly formed a seal. Whoosh! The air shook, and she unexpectedly disappeared in front of Tang Zheng. "Huh!" Tang Zheng could not help but exclaim. Although this Junko was young, she was not a fake. Her ninjutsu had actually reached such a level. However, this was not the first time that Tang Zheng had seen this kind of ninjutsu. The Emperor's younger brother also used this kind of ninjutsu and was finally defeated by Tang Zheng. Junko's cultivation was even weaker than the Emperor's younger brother. In front of Tang Zheng, it was like one you playing with a knife. He did not even use war spirit. Instead, he used a pair of thin hands to cut the void in front of him. Whoosh! A strong wind blew and the air shook. Junko's figure appeared again. Tang Zheng's hand had already reached her chest. She hurriedly blocked with both hands. Bang! Both of her hands were struck by Tang Zheng's hand, causing her to fall back and fiercely hit her chest. Even her chest was flattened. Puff! She spat out a mouthful of blood. Her eyes flashed with shock and pain. With a muffled groan, she quickly retreated. Tang Zheng stood with his hands behind his back. He did not continue to pursue. Instead, he calmly said, "You are not my opponent. If you continue to fight with me, you will die without a doubt. Even if you kill me, you can forget about making me surrender." Junko angrily stared at him and said with a sonorous voice, "Killing you is too easy. Since you have chased me, then I will let you pass a message to the Imperial Advisor's residence. Tell me the details of the warship bombarding the island. Perhaps the Emperor will have a chance to live. Otherwise, I don't mind letting the people of the island nation watch their Emperor disappear from this world." Junko's expression changed. "You are so unbridled. There will definitely be no good result. You will die miserably. You don't have to worry about this. Pass my message. I want to know the answer tomorrow. At that time, you will come here alone with the answer. If you dare to play any tricks, the consequences will be very serious." With that said, Tang Zheng flashed backwards and disappeared from Junko's line of sight at lightning speed. Junko wanted to chase after him, but stopped in her tracks. She knew that she was not his opponent. Previously, when she heard Li Xiaotian talking about this person's strength, she didn't believe it. But after seeing it with her own eyes, she understood the gap between them. She was known as the #1 genius of the island nation. Her master, the imperial advisor, once asserted that her achievements in the future would even surpass him. So, from childhood to adulthood, she wore the halo of a genius. Gradually, she adapted to everyone's eyes and the treatment of a genius. But now, she was defeated without any preparation. The halo of a genius instantly dimmed, and one could imagine her mood. She stood on the street and looked at the direction where Tang Zheng disappeared in silence for a long time. After an unknown period of time, she leisurely turned around and strode away. There were green hills and clear waters. Next to a gurgling stream, there were houses in groups of 3 to 5. It looked like a small village. It was quiet and strange, giving a feeling of a paradise. Especially this place was located near Tokyo, which made it even more precious. But strangely, no stranger discovered this paradise. The people walking around nodded and greeted each other. Apparently, they were very familiar with this place. As soon as Junko stepped into this place, someone immediately stopped and respectfully saluted her. Junko returned the salute for the first time, which made everyone curious. In the past, when someone saluted her, she would proudly leave without showing any kindness. There must be a demon behind this. Everyone looked at Junko with suspicion. This genius of the Imperial Advisor's residence. Yes, this was the legendary and mysterious Imperial Advisor's residence. No one would have thought that the famous Imperial Advisor's residence would be an ancient village. It didn't have the majesty of an Imperial Advisor's residence. But the people walking around showed that this place was different. Everyone's footsteps were very brisk, like a gust of wind. Their movements were elegant, exuding a different kind of charm. Junko walked into the depths of the village. A moment later, she arrived in front of a wooden house. This wooden house was even smaller than the other houses. It was particularly inconspicuous, especially the holes in the wall, which made the wooden house look a bit dilapidated. When Junko approached the wooden door, she respectfully stopped. The various expressions on her face completely disappeared. Instead, it was replaced by a tranquil tranquility. Imperial Advisor. Junko softly called in island nation language. The wooden door didn't respond, as if there was no one inside. After a long while, an old voice came from the wooden house. Junko, you are impetuous. Go to the Sword Forest and meditate for half a day. Junko didn't have the slightest dissatisfaction. She deeply bowed and said, yes. She turned and left the wooden house. The wooden house was the same as before. It didn't have the slightest domineering aura, but it made people deeply feel the difference. Junko strolled to the deepest part of the village. It was a bamboo forest, which was an extremely important place in the Imperial Advisor's residence. The Sword Forest was the place where the disciples of the Imperial Advisor's residence practiced their swordsmanship. But not everyone could come here to practice their swordsmanship. Ordinary disciples could only practice their swordsmanship mechanically by the stream over and over again. Only those who had reached the great Tao of swordsmanship were qualified to come here to practice their swordsmanship and comprehend the essence of swordsmanship. It was said that all the Imperial Advisors had comprehended the great Tao of swordsmanship in the Sword Forest. There were too many magical places in this bamboo forest. What one could obtain was entirely dependent on one's luck. It wasn't Junko's first time in the Sword Forest. The moment she stepped into the Sword Forest, although the scenery in all directions didn't change at all, her entire person had changed. Looking up, these green bamboos were no longer green bamboos. Instead, they had turned into long swords. The long swords stood in great numbers, giving people a sense of awe-inspiring mystery. Chapter 672. Junko's speed was very fast, like a bolt of lightning shuttling through the forest of swords, and the wind blew the bamboos. She didn't have a sword in her hand, but her fingers quickly formed a series of hand seals. Every time she formed a hand seal, the air would vibrate, as if there was a mysterious power contained within the hand seal. These hand seals were very important in ninjutsu, and they were the source of power. This was the experience accumulated by countless ancestors. As long as a hand seal was formed, the corresponding ninjutsu would be activated. This was very different from the magic of Huaxia. It was derived from the island nation after learning the basics of magic. When ninjutsu was practiced to the extreme, these hand seals didn't necessarily need to be formed with both hands. With a move of the mind, the ninjutsu would naturally be activated. This was much faster and more powerful than the hand seals he made. Junko's cultivation hadn't reached that level yet, but her fingers were flying and forming hand seals was very fast. These hand seals were kendo hand seals. Although there was no sword, a trace of sword energy had already spread in the air. All of a sudden, she stopped in her tracks and pushed her hands forward. Vast and mighty sword chi surged forward like an avalanche. Pa. Angle the bamboo bent backward and almost fell to the ground, but it didn't break. It seemed to be very resilient. As soon as the sword energy passed, the bamboo bounced back and pierced the sky. Kacha! The sound of silk tearing suddenly sounded, which was particularly eye-catching in this silent forest of swords. Junko's face changed slightly, and her eyes locked on a bamboo not far away. A crack appeared on the bamboo, and then the crack spread in all directions at a speed visible to the naked eye. In an instant, the bamboo was full of cracks. Junko's eyes flashed with ecstasy and expectation, as if something good was about to happen. Whoosh, a breeze blew through the forest of swords, and the bamboo leaves rustled. As for the bamboo that was full of cracks, it broke into pieces and turned into powder that drifted in the air. In the blink of an eye, the bamboo that pierced the sky disappeared. Junko didn't move, and she stared at the smoke with a strange look in her eyes. The smoke dissipated, and a ray of light lit up. Junko's breathing became rapid, and without blinking, she walked step by step toward the light. Finally, this ray of light revealed its true appearance. It was a sword, green all over, and it was like a pool of autumn water, rippling with a mysterious aura. Junko stood in front of the sword and stared at it with burning eyes, muttering to herself, "The sword forest finally gave me a sword. The sword forest gave a sword." This was the dream of the Imperial Preceptor's disciples. Only when their cultivation reached a certain level would the sword forest give a sword. This was an independent behavior of the sword forest, and even the Imperial Preceptor couldn't change it. From this point, one could also see the magic of the forest. Junko's hands trembled as she reached out and grabbed the hilt. She subconsciously closed her eyes, as if she was carefully perceiving the sword. Clang! The long sword was lifted up high by Junko. The setting sun sprinkled down from the sky, and the mottled light reflected off the sword, rippling with a mysterious and powerful aura. Junko sighed in her heart. She had been cultivating for so long and had been looking forward to this day, but she hadn't had a breakthrough. She didn't expect to gain so much after fighting with Tang Zheng this time. She couldn't help but think of that delicate face. With a complicated expression, she sighed, "Should I thank him? Humph." In the next second, she rejected this ridiculous idea. This was her own contribution over a long period of time. What did it have to do with that person? Since her cultivation had improved by leaps and bounds, and the sword forest had given her a sword, the next time she met Tang Zheng, the outcome would be uncertain. She was full of confidence and excitement. She took a deep look at the sword forest and strode out of the forest. While strolling in the village, pairs of surprised eyes were fixed on the long sword in her hand. Many people reacted, and their eyes were filled with envy. Junko walked in front of the crowd with a calm expression. Suddenly, a person walked in front of her and blocked her way. Li Xiaotian looked at Junko with a complicated expression and said, "Is the sword forest really so magical? Your cultivation has improved greatly after going in." Junko looked at her indifferently and didn't say a word. I really want to go to your sword forest and experience it once, Li Xiaotian said enviously. Junko's expression turned cold, and she warned, the sword forest is an important place in the Imperial Preceptor's residence. Unauthorized people are not allowed to enter, let alone an outsider like you. If you dare to have any ideas about the sword forest, I advise you to give up. Junko was very curious about Li Xiaotian. Back then, the Imperial Preceptor asked her to bring Li Xiaotian back. The two of them talked for a long time behind closed doors, and even Junko didn't know what they talked about. This added a mysterious aura to Li Xiaotian's body. In the past few days, Li Xiaotian had been staying in the village like a transcendent existence. It was unknown why she continued to stay here. Junko instinctively resisted Li Xiaotian. Perhaps it was because they were both women, especially beautiful women, and they didn't get along well with each other. However, due to the Imperial Preceptor's orders, she didn't dare to do anything to Li Xiaotian. Li Xiaotian didn't care about Junko's warning. Instead, she looked at the sword forest from afar, and her eyes kept changing. No one knew what she was thinking. Have you found Tang Zheng? Li Xiaotian retracted her gaze and asked. Junko hesitated for a moment and said, he showed up today. Li Xiaotian raised his eyebrows and said, oh, then he should be the one who showed up on his own, and not you who found him, right? Junko's eyes flashed with a strange color. Li Xiaotian had guessed correctly. Li Xiaotian wasn't surprised at all and said with a smile, Tang Zheng is very cunning. If he really wants to hide, I'm afraid there aren't many people in this world who can find him. However, I don't think he can hide forever. If he has a request, then of course he will have to show up. Junko stared straight at Li Xiaotian and asked, you know his purpose? Of course. He has the Emperor in his hands. Of course you won't refuse to use the Emperor's life in exchange for the truth of the island incident. Li Xiaotian said. Junko couldn't laugh anymore. She coldly snorted and turned to walk toward the cabin. Li Xiaotian chuckled twice and followed closely behind him. What are you doing? Junko stopped in front of the cabin and stared at Li Xiaotian. Li Xiaotian didn't move and said with a smile, I want to see the Imperial Preceptor, so of course I have to come here. Do you think you can see the Imperial Preceptor as you wish? Junko angrily said. Even the Emperor couldn't see the Imperial Preceptor as he wished. What ability did this outsider have to say that he wanted to see the Imperial Preceptor? Did he think this was his family's land? Li Xiaotian didn't get angry and lightly said, the Imperial Preceptor has the final say. Your words can't make the decision. After that, he pushed the wooden door. Junko wanted to stop him, but an old voice jumped out from the crack of the door. Junko, invite the guest in. Junko's movement immediately froze. Her face slightly changed, and she had to stop her attack. Squeak! The wooden door automatically opened. Li Xiaotian walked in, and the light immediately dimmed. Only the faint light outside the window and outside the door shone into the cabin, allowing people to vaguely recognize the surrounding environment. Although it was the second time he came in, Li Xiaotian still felt his heart being fiercely squeezed, and a sense of suffocation hit him in the face. This wooden house wasn't very big, especially after seeing the situation inside. He felt that the wooden house was very small. There was very little furniture in the cabin. There was only a table and a bed. It was very simple. Of course, there's a reason for this. It was because there wasn't enough space in the cabin. Most of the cabin was occupied by a large pit. There was a large pit in the middle of the cabin. It was filled with swords, like a pool of swords. This large pit was the sword pool. It was a relic left behind by the Imperial Preceptor. It was another important place in the Imperial Preceptor's residence besides the sword forest. However, the sword pool was guarded by the Imperial Preceptor. No one was allowed to approach it without permission. Li Xiaotian couldn't help but look at the sword pool. Even though he had seen it once, when he saw it again, he still felt a kind of austere aura coming from it. This sword pool was very famous, even more famous than the sword forest. It was because of the masters of these swords. The masters of these swords were all experts of their generation, especially sword experts. These people came to challenge the master of the Imperial Preceptor's residence, the Imperial Preceptor. However, time after time, it was proven that their challenge was ridiculous and laughable. Compared to the Imperial Preceptor, they couldn't withstand a single blow and were not worth mentioning. It was precisely because they lost to the Imperial Preceptor that their swords were left in the sword pool. After accumulating for a long time, the sword pool became what it was today. Junko followed Li Xiaoyan's gaze and looked at the sword pool. She snorted coldly as if to remind Li Xiaotian not to let his imagination run wild. Of course, there were many precious divine weapons in the sword pool. Even after so many years, the quality and power of these weapons were definitely not bad. It was a coincidence for an ordinary person to obtain a divine weapon. However, there were so many divine weapons that were covered in dust. It couldn't help but sigh. If one could take away one of the swords, its power would definitely increase greatly after leaving the sword pool. However, the Imperial Preceptor's residents had never done so. They had always kept the sword pool as a place for their disciples to visit. Li Xiaotian shifted his gaze slightly and looked at the darkness behind the sword pool. In the darkness, a person was quietly sitting cross-legged. His face couldn't be seen clearly, but he seemed to be very thin and small. He sat quietly on the chair with his head lowered. Li Xiaotian already knew that this person was the famous Imperial Preceptor. He didn't dare to be the slightest bit arrogant and cupped his hands in greeting. Chapter 673. State Teacher's words of congratulations made Junko ecstatic. She quickly bowed and said, "Everything is thanks to State Teacher." State Teacher shook his head and said, "This is the result of your hard work and luck. This sword is like autumn water. Why don't you call it Autumn Water Sword?" Junko excitedly said, "Thank you, State Teacher, for the name." She subconsciously stroked the sword. "From now on, this sword will be called Autumn Water." State Teacher nodded with gratification. Then he turned to Li Xiaotian and asked, "Miss Xiaotian, why are you looking for me?" "State Teacher, I heard from Junko that she found Tang Zhang's whereabouts, so I came to inquire," Li Xiaotian said. The Imperial Tutor looked at Junko without batting an eyelid. Junko understood and said, "Reporting to the Imperial Tutor, Tang Zhang took the initiative to appear outside the Imperial residence. We couldn't capture him. He's a cultivator. His cultivation is high. How could he be captured alive so easily?" The Imperial Tutor said dismissively, "Since he has appeared, there must be something else. State Teacher has a divine foresight. He asked me to pass a few words to you," Junko said while looking at Li Xiaotian. Li Xiaotian was unmoved. He didn't have any intention to avoid suspicion. Instead, he waited for her to speak with interest. Seeing that the State Preceptor had no objection, Junko suppressed the displeasure in her heart and truthfully repeated Tang Zhang's words. State Teacher heard this but didn't get angry. Instead, he looked at Li Xiaotian and said, "This person really hasn't given up. He wants to know the answer to the island." "Actually, I also want to know the answer," Li Xiaotian said with a smile. State Teacher chuckled and said, "The inside story of this matter is too complicated. It's better to know less." Li Xiaotian was unmoved and calmly said, "I am a very curious person. I want to know more." "Is that so?" State Teacher gave a meaningful laugh. Suddenly, his tone changed as he said, "I can tell you the truth. The people on that island have all been imprisoned." "Imprisoned?" Li Xiaotian's expression changed greatly. Since Wu Junshan and the others were living on the island, they must be extremely powerful, even terrifying. Who in this world could imprison them? Li Xiaotian felt that all of this was inconceivable. If it was someone else who said this, she would definitely think that it was a fantasy story and that the other party was lying to her. However, since it came from the Grand Tutor's mouth, there was no doubt about it. Yes, those people are a huge threat, not only to the island nation, but also to the martial artists of Huaxia. So someone told me this news, and then I thought of a way to imprison them. The Imperial Advisor said lightly. Li Xiaotian's face stiffened. He seemed to have thought of a possibility and asked tentatively, "Who told you this news?" "Then who told you to come to the island nation?" State Teacher didn't answer and asked back. Li Xiaotian was startled and blurted out, "Palace Master!" State teacher chuckled and didn't say anything else. Li Xiaotian was shocked. She didn't expect that all of this was controlled by the Palace Master, especially the whereabouts of Wu Junshan and the others. Even she didn't know about it, but the Palace Master knew about it, and even hid it from her. This feeling of not being trusted made her very uncomfortable. Of course, she didn't doubt the authenticity of State Teacher's words because the Palace Master didn't give her any specific orders. He only said that when the time was right, she would naturally know everything. Now that the time was right, she actually learned this news from an outsider. A feeling of being deceived arose spontaneously. Junko looked at State Teacher and Li Xiaotian with mixed feelings. She didn't know the information conveyed by these words. She didn't know what State Teacher was hiding from her. Of course, she didn't have the slightest anger or resentment because State Teacher's image in her mind was too high and couldn't be questioned. Since he didn't say it, there must be a reason. She only needed to silently watch. Why did the Palace Master tell you this news? After pondering for a long time, Li Xiaotian asked. Maybe she thinks her strength is not enough to deal with those people. Nonsense, Li Xiaotian shouted. His anger gradually replaced his reverence for the Imperial Preceptor. Junko heard this and flew into a rage. She stood in front of Li Xiaotian and glared at him. Don't be rude to State Teacher. Li Xiaotian snorted and was about to fly into a rage when State Teacher said, Junko, don't worry. Miss Li, your Palace Master is farsighted. She told me this news, of course, there must be a deep meaning. As for what I said just now, only I have the strength to deal with those people. It's not an arrogant statement. Because the facts are the best proof. Li Xiaotian took a few deep breaths. There were more and more questions in his mind, as if they were about to rush out from the top of his head. Why did the Palace Master do all this? Why did she ask others to do it? Was it really like State Teacher said, only he had the strength to deal with Wu Junshan and the others quietly? But she really couldn't see how State Teacher was more powerful than Wu Junshan or the Palace Master. State Teacher must be a Grandmaster. As for the level of Grandmaster, Li Xiaotian certainly couldn't see, but he couldn't be so powerful that he could easily imprison Wu Junshan and the others. In short, all of this was too strange. Then where did you imprison those people? Li Xiaotian asked unwillingly. State Teacher smiled mysteriously and said, You don't need to worry about that. But Tang Zheng has given an ultimatum. If you don't tell him what happened on the island, or even let those people go, the Emperor will die. This kind of loss is difficult to make up for your country. State Teacher laughed out loud. He wants to threaten me. I'm really curious how far he can go in the end. As he said this, State Teacher silently thought in his heart, Tang Zheng is a cultivator. Just this identity alone is enough for me to capture him. He has hidden secrets that need to be unearthed. You don't want to care about the life and death of the Emperor anymore? Hearing State Teacher's answer, Li Xiaotian's heart was filled with doubts and asked. State Teacher laughed mysteriously, but didn't answer this question. Seeing that he couldn't get any useful information, Li Xiaotian could only helplessly say, If there is any news, please let me know. With that, he turned around and walked out of the small wooden house. Looking at the gradually darkening sky, her heart was in a mess. Why did the Palace Master do all this? Why did he ask her to come to the island nation at this time? Was it really to treat the Emperor's illness? There were too many doubts and mysteries in this. She walked in the darkness with 1 foot and 1 foot, her head in a mess. Unknowingly, she actually came to the side of the sword forest. She stopped in her tracks and raised her head to look at the dark and deep sword forest. It was as if many towering swords were erected in front of her, and a murderous aura rushed towards her. Is the sword forest really as powerful as the legends say? She had heard too many legends about the sword forest in the past few days. Although she didn't practice swordsmanship, she knew a little about it. Many of the State Teacher's residence's predecessors had comprehended swordsmanship from the sword forest. This definitely showed that the sword forest was not just powerful and mysterious. The State Teacher's residence is full of mysteries, and it's not a good idea for me to stay here aimlessly. Why don't I explore the sword forest and see if I can find anything? She immediately did as she thought, and her eyes immediately became determined. Although the state teacher's residence had repeatedly ordered that outsiders were not allowed to enter the sword forest, the prideful her didn't take this order to heart. Moreover, her curiosity towards the state teacher's residence had increased greatly. It was necessary for her to find out something. When she first met the state teacher, the two of them had a long private conversation. Outsiders didn't know the content of their conversation, but in fact, there weren't many secrets that couldn't be revealed. However, there was one thing that Li Xiaotian could confirm from the conversation with the state teacher, that the palace master and the state teacher were old acquaintances. Their friendship seemed to be quite deep. Although Li Xiaotian was still a little brooding about this matter, he didn't show it. In fact, Li Xiaotian looked down on people from the island nation. This time, he was acting under orders, so he was so close to people from the island nation. However, she really didn't understand why Palace Master White, who had a high status and amazing strength, wanted to mix with the state teacher of the island nation. Since you don't want to tell me the answer directly, I'll find it myself. I'll start with the sword forest and dig out the secrets of the state teacher's residence. Li Xiaotian was determined and strode into the sword forest. The sword forest was pitch black, but there wasn't a trace of mosquitoes or frogs. It was eerily silent. Li Xiaotian walked in with a calm expression and began to wander in the sword forest. The bright moonlight sprinkled down. There was a faint light in the sword forest, so it wasn't dark. The sword forest wasn't big. Li Xiaotian wandered around for more than 10 minutes, but he didn't find any clues. The sword forest was no different from an ordinary bamboo forest, but why did it become an important place of the state teacher's residence? The state teacher's residence had been passed down for so many years. How could they treat a useless bamboo forest as a treasure? This meant that the sword forest was definitely not as simple as it looked. She wandered around 2 more times unwillingly, but still found nothing. She was almost in despair. Maybe it's thanks to the state teacher's disciple that I had the opportunity to comprehend the swordsmanship. She shook her head helplessly and walked out of the sword forest dejectedly. After walking for a while, she found that there were still towering bamboos in all directions. The path she came from had disappeared. She didn't panic. Instead, she looked around with interest. There were identical bamboos all around her. There was no sense of direction or specific road signs. I'm lost, but I didn't realize how big the sword forest was. How could I be lost? She muttered unwillingly. She was never one to admit defeat easily. Since she was lost, she would find another way. If these bamboos were in her way, she didn't mind chopping down the bamboos to clear a path. There's something strange about the sword forest. She stopped in her tracks. She knew that running around like a headless fly would definitely cause problems. She looked into the distance, and all she could see were tall green bamboos. Chapter 674. Li Xiaotian was good at using bows and arrows, which was also why she had always coveted the heaven-shocking bow and the shooting sun arrows. At this moment, the arrow in her hand was not a shooting sun arrow. She only had one shooting sun arrow, and unless she had no other choice, she would definitely not use this divine armament. Wang. With the release of his finger, the arrow flew out. The surging airflow stirred up the air in all directions, causing the bamboo leaves to rustle nonstop. Ding! With a crisp sound, the arrow hit a green bamboo. However, a strange scene happened. The green bamboo was undamaged. It was only bent in a large arc by the force of the bow and arrow. Then it quickly bounced back, still piercing through the sky. Li Xiaotian's pupils constricted as he looked at this scene in disbelief. This was just a green bamboo. How could it block such a powerful arrow attack? There must be a demon when things are abnormal. She felt more and more that this sword forest was strange. Not only did it block her path and confuse her direction, even this kind of attack was unable to harm the green bamboo in the slightest. She gradually began to believe the legends about the sword forest. There really was some kind of mysterious power that could not be explained clearly. A small country like this actually has such a magical place. It's strange. Li Xiaotian shook her head. She was very puzzled. So what if it's magical? I don't believe that a living person like me will be trapped in this bamboo forest to death. Li Xiaotian's prideful nature erupted. How could she admit defeat to the bamboo forest? Wouldn't that make people laugh their heads off? Thus, she took a deep breath and pulled the bowstring again. Waves of inner strength passed through her arm and into the bowstring. The bowstring was pulled into a full moon, and the arrowhead shone with a cold light under the moonlight. Swoosh! The arrow left the line, and the air seemed to be torn apart, producing a sharp sound of breaking through the air. Boom! A green bamboo was hit once again, and the berserk force directly pressed it to the ground. I think you're still going on like this. Li Xiaotian's eyes revealed a trace of complacency. However, in the next second, her face froze. Her eyes were wide open as she stared straight at the green bamboo. The bamboo that had fallen to the ground just now bounced back, as if nothing had happened. It was still proud and straight. This! Li Xiaotian was dumbfounded. He had never seen or heard of such a situation before. Was this still an ordinary green bamboo? She quickly stroked the bamboo pole beside her, but there was nothing strange. Wasn't this just ordinary bamboo? But since when did bamboo have such a strong ability to withstand attacks? What the devil, what the devil? She couldn't help but exclaim. She looked up at the bright moon hanging high in the sky. Although she was very unwilling, she had to admit that she was trapped in this forest of swords. Inside the wooden hut, the Imperial Preceptor and Junko were talking. The Imperial Preceptor was still hidden in the darkness, and his face couldn't be seen clearly. However, his thin and small body made people feel an inexplicable pressure. Junko had long since gotten used to this kind of aura and pressure. She even felt a sense of familiarity. The two of them chatted as time slowly passed. Junko spent most of her time listening and comprehending the Imperial Preceptor's profound meaning and instructions. When the Imperial Preceptor finally stopped, Junko asked, "Imperial Preceptor, are we really going to do this? Those people are imprisoned, and even I can't release them. Therefore, this matter is no longer under my control. This is the only feasible way." The Imperial Preceptor said somewhat vexedly. Although Junko was surprised that the Imperial Preceptor said that even he couldn't control this matter, she didn't ask further. Since the Imperial Preceptor didn't say anything, she naturally wouldn't ask. This was a habit cultivated over many years. However, she still frowned and said worriedly, "But if we do this, then this matter will really blow up, and we might even suffer heavy losses. There will be losses in everything. We just have to think of a way to remedy it." The Imperial Preceptor said disapprovingly. Junko wanted to say something, but hesitated. But in the end, she swallowed her words. Since the Imperial Preceptor had already made a decision, then she should wholeheartedly carry it out. There was no room for negotiation. "Yes, Junko understands." Junko nodded in acknowledgement. Suddenly, the Imperial Preceptor exclaimed in surprise. His voice became somewhat cold. "Someone has broken into the Forest of Swords. Who is so bold?" Junko glared and flew into a rage. The Forest of Swords was an important place in the Imperial Preceptor's residence. For so many years, no one had ever dared to trespass into the Forest of Swords. Suddenly, her heart stirred as she remembered that familiar face. She said angrily, "Is it Li Xiaotian?" The Imperial Preceptor said calmly, "It's most likely her. Go and bring her out. Otherwise, she will definitely be trapped in the Forest of Swords. Serve her right. She only has herself to blame." Junko said with a murderous look. "Bring her out," the Imperial Preceptor repeated. Junko's angry words were immediately swallowed back. The Imperial Preceptor had already repeated the order. If she dared to talk nonsense, then the consequences would be very serious. Junko left the cabin, leaving the Imperial Preceptor alone. He quietly hid in the darkness and muttered to himself, "Li Palace, I'm afraid you didn't expect to send me such a big gift like Tang Zheng. As long as I have him, many of Hua Xia's long-lost techniques will be able to see the light of day again." As long as I learn these techniques, I will be able to perfect my ninjutsu and bring it to a new peak. Completely surpassing Hua Xia's techniques will be just around the corner. At that time, the empire will rise again in the forest of the world. Hua Xia and other countries will crawl under our feet, allowing the empire to complete the unfinished business of our ancestors. His words gradually revealed a sense of madness. It made people tremble in fear. Li Xiaotian had already used all of her skills, but she still couldn't break out of this forest of swords. Her martial arts were like scratching an itch, unable to hurt the slightest bit of the forest of swords. Could it be that they really want to force me to use the shooting sun arrows? She touched the shooting sun arrows that she always carried on her back. The shooting sun arrows were divine weapons. They couldn't be easily shown to others, so as to avoid attracting the disaster of killing monks. But now that she was trapped in this damned forest, she was so angry that she was ready to use the shooting sun arrows. She didn't believe that these cabinets could withstand the power of the shooting sun arrows. It must be known that the shooting sun arrows were used to shoot down the sun. Just as she was about to make up her mind, a person's figure became clear under the moonlight. It gradually approached and finally arrived in front of Li Xiaotian. Junko looked at Li Xiaotian with an unkind expression and said coldly, "You trespassed into the forest of swords. That is a capital offense." Li Xiaotian was unmoved and said indifferently, "Then are you here to kill me?" "Humph, the state teacher is merciful and has given you a way out. If you dare to run amok again, then I guarantee you will regret it." Junko's killing intense soared. With her temper, she really wanted to kill Li Xiaotian on the spot. But she didn't dare to disobey the state teacher's orders. Li Xiaotian shrugged and smiled indifferently. She strode in the direction Junko came from and left the forest of swords in a short while. Junko followed behind her step by step, monitoring her and preventing her from causing any trouble. Li Xiaotian quietly returned to her room. Junko stood outside for a long time before turning around and leaving. Li Xiaotian lay on the bed, staring at the ceiling with her eyes wide open. Hundreds of thoughts ran through her mind. The state teacher's residence is more mysterious than I expected. Especially in the forest of swords, the strangeness and mystery is far beyond my imagination. I must get to the bottom of it. These years, although the island nation and Hua Xia coexisted peacefully, a dog can't stop itself from eating shit. This is a truth that has been proven for thousands of years. If the island nation continues to grow stronger, they will definitely rise again and stir up more storms. Li Xiaotian's understanding was clear and deep. She didn't really treat the state teacher's residence as a little sheep just because of their temporary close relationship. The island nation was like a poisonous snake, always waiting for an opportunity to strike. As long as the other party was given the chance, they would take a fatal bite. After returning to the Li Palace this time, I must ask the palace master about this matter. The cooperation between the Li Palace and the state teacher's residence puzzled Li Xiaotian and even made her somewhat dissatisfied. Her thoughts were more flexible than Junko's. Although the palace master didn't tell her the truth, she still wanted to know the ins and outs of the matter. The next day, Junko left the state teacher's residence alone, but she didn't notice that Li Xiaotian was following her from a distance. Li Xiaotian was good at hiding her tracks, so she followed from a distance to find out where Junko was going. Based on her intuition, she was sure that Junko was going on some secret operation. She had been in the state teacher's residence for a few days, but she had been doing nothing and making no progress. This made her very frightened and dissatisfied. Back then, the palace master only told her to act according to the circumstances and didn't give her any specific arrangements. Her operation this time was more like an experience. Li Xiaotian wasn't someone who spent her days muddling along. Since she was here, she naturally had to get to the bottom of everything. Junko was as fast as a shooting star. It didn't take long for her to arrive at the place where she and Tang Zheng had agreed to meet yesterday. Looking up, there was no one around. Did he go back on his words? Junko frowned. Why would I go back on my words? A voice suddenly rang in Junko's ears. She was startled and subconsciously jumped to the side, staring at him like a tiger watching its prey. She didn't know how he could appear and disappear so mysteriously. "Did you bring the information I asked for?" Tang Zheng asked. Junko's expression was stern. "I have to see the Emperor first before I can tell you the information." "Hee. Are you afraid that I'll lie to you? One must always be on guard against others. These are the rules of the game that I set. You have no right to bargain." Tang Zheng slightly frowned and said with dissatisfaction, "Then there's nothing to talk about." Junko's attitude was very firm. "If I can't see the Emperor, then there's nothing to talk about. You're not afraid that I'll kill him?" Tang Zheng said fiercely. "Don't scare me. If you kill him, then you won't know anything about those people." Junko joked. Tang Zheng's eyelids twitched. If that was the case, then she really did know about Wu Junshan and the others. Compared to the Mikado, he cared more about the safety of these people. Obviously, Junko was also very clear about this, so she refused to let it go. "Fine, then I'll let you see the Emperor. If you dare to lie to me, then I'll immediately behead him," Tang Zheng said decisively. Chapter 675. Tang Zheng gestured towards a distance, and two figures walked out from behind an obstacle. It was the Martial Emperor and the Heavenly Emperor. The Heavenly Emperor was in a sorry state, but when he saw Junko, his expression immediately became excited. However, he was tightly controlled by the Martial Emperor and could not escape at all. He could only watch from afar. The two of them did not approach, but deliberately maintained a certain distance. Junko's eyes revealed a strange look and said, "Let them come closer." The corner of Tang Zheng's mouth curled, and he sneered. "You want to save the Heavenly Emperor, right? Stop dreaming. Just looking from afar is enough. If you dare to push your luck, then there's nothing to talk about." How could Tang Zheng be led by the nose by the other party, and gradually took the initiative? Junko's expression changed, and she finally gritted her teeth and said, "All right, then listen carefully. The source of the news on the island is Li Palace." Li Palace? Tang Zheng's pupils suddenly constricted. Although Li Xiaoyan's appearance had already made him guess, when he personally confirmed it, he was still very shocked. Li Xiaoyan was hiding far away, and could vaguely hear the conversation between the two. When she heard that Junko did not hesitate to sell out Li Palace, she was furious, and her eyes were about to spit fire. Li Xiaoyan gritted her teeth in hatred. This girl from the island nation was indeed not a trustworthy person to sell out Li Palace so cleanly. But she did not think about how she had sold out Tang Zheng back then, and almost took his life. It was truly a case of the pot calling the kettle black. As expected, it was Li Palace's doing. Li Palace's intelligence network is spread all over the world, and it is not a boast. Even this vast island could not escape their investigation. But why did they tell you this news? Because that island is closer to our country. Also, Li Palace is very clear that we have the strength to deal with those people. You have the strength? Don't lie. Those people are not weak people. What qualifications do you have to say that you can deal with them? Tang Zheng did not agree, because he was very clear about the strength of Wu Junshan and the rest. Junko smiled calmly and said, "Isn't the truth the best evidence?" Tang Zheng was speechless. After a while, he asked, "What did you do to them?" "Of course it's locked up." Tang Zheng was overjoyed. Since Wu Junshan and the others were not dead, it was not too late. "Where is it?" "Of course it's a very secret place. Without my guidance, outsiders wouldn't be able to find it even if they dug 3 feet into the ground," Junko said confidently. Tang Zheng glared at him. "Then aren't you afraid that I'll kill the Heavenly Emperor?" "Of course I am. So, let's make a deal. You give me the Emperor, and I'll tell you the location." "That's too unfair. I haven't even seen him, and I'm handing the Emperor over to you. Do you really think I'm a 3-year-old child? So easy to fool?" Tang Zheng said angrily. Junko hesitated for a moment, then said, "All right, I can hand him over to you, but you have to let the Emperor come over. I want to check if he's injured. If you did something to him, then there's no need to talk about it." Tang Zheng hesitated. Just what kind of trick was this Junko playing? As if she had seen through Tang Zheng's thoughts, Junko laughed mockingly. Your cultivation is higher than mine. Don't tell me you're afraid of me? Tang Jing's heart moved. The other party's strength was not as good as his. Even if he brought the Emperor over for her check, she wouldn't be able to play any tricks, let alone take him away from under his nose. All right, if the Emperor is fine, then you have to use those people to exchange for the Emperor. Tang Zheng agreed. Junko smiled, tacitly agreeing to his suggestion. Tang Zheng waved his hand, and Marshall walked over with the Emperor. Is there any news? After walking closer, Marshall asked impatiently. Tang Zheng nodded, indicating for her to calm down, and said to Junko, check. Junko smiled in satisfaction. She extended her hand and touched the Emperor's body, as though she wanted to check if there was anything wrong with his body. Tang Zheng and Marshall were both cold. They looked at Junko without saying a word. Suddenly, the Emperor's face changed. He let out a heart-wrenching scream. What are you doing? Before he finished, Junko had already retreated. An autumn water-like sword appeared in her hand. The sword tip was still stained with blood, dripping to the ground. Junko's eyes released a biting, cold, killing intent. She coldly looked at the sinister-looking Emperor. The others were dumbstruck at this scene. Tang Zheng, Marshall, and even Li Xiaotian, who was hiding in the shadows, all had their mouths wide open, to the point where a duck egg could be stuffed in. Damn, what the hell is going on? Why would Junko want to kill the Emperor? This world is too messed up. The three of their brains were not enough. Even if they were smart, they could not figure out what was going on. Blood flowed out from the Emperor's throat. His face was distorted from the pain, as though he was an evil spirit that crawled out from hell. You, so ruthless. The Emperor stretched out his finger, trembling as he pointed at Junko. Gasping for breath, he spoke intermittently. You can't die, Tang Zheng shouted. He immediately supported the Emperor, his fingers quickly poking his body, trying to save his life. But after a while, he realized that it was all in vain. The Emperor's heart had already been pierced through by the sword. His life was cut off. There was no way to save him. Why did you kill him? Isn't he your heavenly Emperor? Tang Zheng roared hysterically at Junko. Without the Emperor as a hostage, the whereabouts of Wu Junshan and the rest would be impossible to investigate. The other party had spent so much effort, even sacrificing the Emperor so that they would not let Tang Zheng know of this news. It could be said that they had put in a lot of effort. Hearing this, Junko was unmoved. She smiled faintly and said, How can you guess the Imperial Advisor's decision? Marshall was unable to restrain his anger. He roared, Without the Emperor, I will take you as a hostage. With that said, she disappeared from where she was and attacked Junko. Junko's left hand formed a seal, her right hand holding the sword. Her hand seals flew. The autumn water sword was immediately filled with a mysterious sword chi. Wong. Her arm suddenly shook. The autumn water sword vibrated. Waves of sword chi shot out from the autumn water sword, shooting towards Marshall. Marshall's face changed. When an expert made a move, one would know whether or not it was real. She had already determined that the opponent's sword technique was definitely not simple. Thus, she bellowed. Her right hand formed a blade, and waves of blazing chi surged out from her palm. She swung it fiercely. Boom! When the sword chi was hit by the roaring flame blade, it was like a surging river meeting a stone. With Marshall's palm as the origin, the sword chi flew to both sides. The surrounding trees and flowers were all hit by the sword chi, turning into ruins. It was a complete mess. You think you can beat me like this? Junko sneered and swung the autumn water sword. 1 turned into 2, 2 turned into 4. In the end, 16 autumn water swords were formed. Kill! Junko shouted. The 16 autumn water swords shot towards Marshall with the sound of wind and thunder. All 3 paths were blocked by the autumn water swords. Marshall's face sank. The opponent's cultivation was high beyond her expectations. She could not accurately judge Junko's cultivation, but she was sure that she was in the Xiantian realm. From the opponent's series of attacks, it could be determined that her cultivation was not inferior to Marshall's. Seeing this, Tang Zheng was deeply shocked. When he fought with Junko yesterday, Junko's strength was far from this. This meant that her cultivation had increased by leaps and bounds overnight. Tang Zheng's eyelids twitched. The people of the Imperial Tutor's residence actually had such a foundation. In just one night, their cultivation could change so drastically. It seemed that the Imperial Tutor's residence was far more powerful than he had imagined. Seeing the autumn water swords coming at her, Marshall jumped into the air, dodging the attacks from the middle and lower paths, but the autumn water sword at the top continued to stab forward. Clang! Clang! Marshall used her hand as a blade. Flames rose into the air crackled, the roaring flame blade danced in the air, fiercely clashing with the autumn water swords. Boom! With a loud sound, the autumn water swords were annihilated, leaving only one behind, while Marshall flew back several meters before coming to a stop. Junko held her sword with one hand and stood proudly, looking at Marshall with sparks in their eyes. In this exchange, both sides were evenly matched. The one with the most complicated feelings was not the person involved, but Li Xiaotian, who was hiding in the dark. Her cultivation was on the same level as Marshall in the past, but ever since Marshall and Tang Zheng came together, they had mysteriously suppressed her. Now, even an Island Nation girl's cultivation was higher than hers. She really wanted to find a piece of tofu and kill herself. Her heart was fiercely hit. She had always been good at scheming, but now she realized that she was simply neglecting the essentials and chasing after the trifles. Even something as fundamental as martial arts had been abandoned. She looked from afar with a complicated expression, biting her lips, all sorts of feelings welling up in her heart. At this time, Tang Zheng realized that the emperor's head was tilted to one side. He had completely lost his life. His mood could not help but become gloomy. Junko, since the emperor is dead, then you will have to replace him as a hostage. With that, his feet flashed, and he appeared in front of Junko, stretching out his hand and grabbing towards her shoulder. Junko quickly retreated, leaving a long trail on the ground. Tang Zheng was like a shadow, his finger getting closer and closer. So, the autumn water sword danced in the air. It was like a waterfall flying through the air, stirring towards Tang Zheng's finger. Ding! Tang Zheng flicked his finger, and the autumn water sword was knocked away, his 5 fingers moving together, about to grab the opponent. But the autumn water sword welcomed it. It was like an unkillable cockroach. Tang Zheng snorted. His hand turned into a fist and heavily smashed down. Pung! With a muffled sound, the fist fiercely landed on the autumn water sword. The sword chi rippled, and Junko turned into a shooting star, flying backwards. Tang Zheng's speed was even faster. Before she landed, he was already standing below her, ready to capture her alive. Junko was in mid-air, looking at Tang Zheng below. She did not despair, but her eyes became abnormally firm. Chapter 676. Tang Zheng stared intently at the complex hand seals in her hand. Initially, when she used ninjutsu, she used hand seals, and the same when she used swordsmanship. He gradually realized that this was probably a trigger mechanism of ninjutsu, which could only be used by hand seals. However, this was completely different from the Emperor's younger brother he had seen before, as well as the Grandmaster martial artist from a few days ago. They didn't need these complicated hand seals to use ninjutsu, and they could use it anytime and anywhere. In fact, it was not difficult to understand, and he soon figured out the reason. Perhaps Junko's cultivation was not high enough, so she couldn't use ninjutsu at will. She had to rely on these handprints to do so. His guess was right. There was a big difference between ninjutsu and Huaxia's magic, because ninjutsu was only the tip of the iceberg, and many of the core things were not learned. But Island Nation people were not stupid. After generations of research, they finally found another way to remedy this problem, and that was hand seals. These complicated hand seals were created and passed down by generations of ninjutsu masters. Before a ninja breaks through to the Grandmaster level, they must rely on these complicated hand seals to perform ninjutsu. Therefore, for an ordinary ninja, The speed of hand seals is directly related to the strength of their attack power and attack power. Junko was obviously one of the best among them. Her slender fingers flew, and the hand seals were completed. Seeing that she was about to fall into Tang Zheng's palm, she stretched out her hand and collided with Tang Zheng's hand. She staggered and fell to the ground. Tang Zheng's foot moved, and he approached her. His hand was like a dragon claw, reaching for her head. Suddenly, she shouted, "Escape!" A strange scene appeared. She actually disappeared in front of everyone's eyes, as if she had never appeared before. Marshall and Li Xiaotian were surprised to see this scene. They originally looked down on the island nation's ninjutsu, but now it seems that they were just frogs in a well. Ninjutsu had many praiseworthy points. Wasn't this scene the best proof? Tang Zheng's face turned cold and said, "Is it another illusion? Let's see where you can hide." Tang Zheng urged his Zhen Qi and crazily circulated it. He sensed the fluctuation in the air. Gradually, his brows wrinkled. There was no fluctuation. Did she really disappear? How is this possible? How could it disappear so quickly? Even Tang Zheng's earth-shrinking technique was unable to do so. Strange. She had called out escape just now. Could this be the legendary escape technique? Tang Zheng had heard of this technique from the Heaven Monk before. In fact, the shrinking earth into an inch was the embryonic form of this escape technique, but the escape technique was even more mystical and its speed was even faster than the shrinking earth into an inch. However, escape techniques required a certain medium. They were divided into earth escape, golden shield, water escape, and wood escape. This time, Junko used the earth escape. Using the soil on the ground as a medium, she escaped in an instant. I was too careless. I didn't think that she would know ninjutsu. I really underestimated ninjutsu. Tang Zheng blamed himself. Since Junko had escaped, it was impossible to find her. No wonder she was fearless and dared to come to see him alone. Last time, she was careless and did not even have the time to use her escape technique before she was stopped by Tang Zheng. This time, she learned to be smart and escaped when the situation was not right. Now that she's gone, where am I going to find her? I don't have the Emperor as a hostage. They won't tell me where those people are being held. Tang Zheng regretted. He was full of confidence, but he didn't expect that the enemy's cunning was beyond his expectation. Now he was at his wit's end. However, his eyelids suddenly twitched. He turned his eyes and looked not far away. There was a slight fluctuation in the air. There was someone. After he circulated his true qi, his perception would become extremely sharp. Even the slightest movement in the wind would not be able to escape his perception. Junko didn't escape. Tang Zheng was overjoyed. His figure flashed and rushed in that direction. Whoosh! A person leaped out from the corner and dashed in the opposite direction like an arrow fired from a bow. It's not Junko. You want to escape? No way. Tang Zheng didn't see the other's appearance, but this kind of skill was definitely not simple. How could he let the other escape? With a leap, he flew over the other's head and steadily landed on the ground, blocking the other's path. Looking closely, he cried out in surprise. "It's you." Li Xiaotian had to stop. She forced a smile and said, "Tang Zheng, we meet again." When enemies meet, their eyes would turn red. Tang Zheng no longer had the slightest bit of pity for Li Xiaotian. A few days ago, he had almost died in her hands. If he continued to be merciful to her, then his brain would be fried. So, Tang Zheng mercilessly attacked. Li Xiaotian didn't resist and quickly fell into Tang Zheng's hands. "You're not afraid that I'll kill you. You still have the guts to come here," Tang Zheng murderously said. Wu also angrily glared and bluntly said, "It's useless to talk to her. She has a glib tongue. Don't be fooled by her." Tang Zheng also had the same intention. This two-faced woman's mouth was like a lotus flower. If he didn't pay attention, he would fall into her trap. It was best not to waste his saliva with her. Seeing Tang Zheng's killing intent, Li Xiaotian's face slightly changed. She couldn't wait to say, "Don't you want to find Junko?" Tang Zheng stopped his movements and lifted her in front of him. Their eyes met, and they could even feel each other's breathing. "What did you say? Say it again." I said, "Don't you want to find Junko?" Li Xiaotian calmly said, "Do you know where she is?" "Of course she is at the Imperial Tutor's Mansion." "In other words, you know where the Imperial Tutor's Mansion is?" Tang Zheng asked. Even National Security Bureau's Su Yingtian didn't know where the Imperial Tutor's Mansion was. This meant that the Li Palace's intelligence was more powerful than the National Security Bureau. Li Xiaotian confidently smiled and said, "Otherwise, where do you think I've been all this time? You actually went to the Imperial Tutor's Mansion. Humph, your Li Palace really colluded with the Island Nation people. In the past, the Island Nation people killed many Huaxia compatriots. You actually colluded with these people. This is simply deceiving your master and destroying your ancestors. You betrayed the entire nation and people." Tang Zheng powerfully accused. He was really too angry. There was a kind of anger burning in his heart. No wonder, even though Huaxia's economy had developed, there were still many countries in the world that looked down on the Huaxia. There was a kind of colluding traitor. No wonder people looked down on them. Li Xiaotian heard this, and his smile froze. He embarrassedly said, "You must have misunderstood. How could our Li Palace collude with the Island Nation people?" "Humph, just now Junko clearly said that the information about the island was given to them by your Li Palace. Using their hands to destroy your opponents, this is really a good move." Tang Zheng sarcastically said, "Even if the palace master did this, she must have her own intentions. You don't understand her intentions and casually guessed. This is an extremely irresponsible way of doing things." Li Xiaotian retorted. Tang Zheng coldly snorted and disdainfully said, "If you dare to do it, then you must dare to admit it. Being so fussy, the Li Palace is nothing more than this." Li Xiaotian wanted to refute, but he had no choice but to swallow his words. It was futile for her to explain any further, because what Tang Zheng said was the truth. "Tang Zheng, don't listen to her. Her mouth is full of lies. Killing her is the best solution," Marshall urged. She had always been brooding over the matter of Li Xiaotian scheming to frame Tang Zheng. She simply thought that what she said was nonsense, a lie made up in order to survive. Li Xiaotian's gaze turned, stared at Marshall, and said, "Ha! Do you want to kill me that much? You must know that our Li Palace and the Marshall sect have been in cahoots for many years." Marshall remained unmoved and coldly said, "I am no longer a member of the Marshall sect. It's useless for you to reminisce with me." "Yeah, it's useless." As expected, none of the people who came out of the Marshall sect were ordinary people. However, my life is in Tang Zheng's hands and not yours, so you can't make the decision. Marshall was speechless. Tang Zheng frowned, waved his hand, and said, "Marshall, we can't kill her for the time being. In order to find the whereabouts of the Imperial Advisor's Mansion, in order to save those people, her life must be preserved for the time being. There's no need. Don't you want to know the information in her mind? Just use the soul-searching technique, and no secrets can be hidden." When Tang Zheng heard this, he sucked in a breath of cold air. A woman against a woman. It was indeed the most brutal. "Li Xiaotian, listen carefully. Tell me the whereabouts of the Imperial Advisor's Mansion now. Otherwise, when I use the soul-searching technique, not only will your secrets be exposed, you will also become a fool because of this and will no longer be able to stir up trouble. You really are ruthless." Li Xiaotian glared hatefully at Marshall, wishing that he could swallow her whole. "Since you understand, then tell me the truth," Tang Zheng urged. "Haha, if I were you, I wouldn't believe this silly woman's words. She's tall and strong, but her brain isn't working well. You can get the information by killing me, but how are you going to enter the Imperial Advisor's Mansion?" Li Xiaotian smiled coldly and asked in ridicule, "What do you mean by that?" Tang Zheng asked, "The Imperial Advisor's Mansion is not that easy to enter, and it is even more difficult to see the Imperial Advisor. It is impossible for ordinary people, but my identity is special, and I can freely enter and leave the Imperial Advisor's Mansion. So, if I die, then I won't be able to bring you there," Li Xiaotian said tirelessly. Although Tang Zheng still had his doubts, he already believed her for the most part. The Imperial Advisor's Mansion was so mysterious, there must be a lot of soldiers guarding it. If Li Xiaotian could bring them in, then everything would be much easier. However, the key was whether or not her words could be trusted. The last time Tang Zheng believed her, he was almost killed. If he were to enter the tiger's den again, it would not be so easy. Tang Zheng, don't believe her. She's a cunning woman. Let's find another way. Marshall anxiously advised. This answer is actually very simple. If you want to save someone, then you have to leave me alive. Otherwise, let me die together with those people. Li Xiaotian pretended to be carefree and said. Chapter 677. Seeing that Tang Zheng had promised to believe in Li Xiaotian, Wu wanted to say something but hesitated. Actually, she was also very conflicted in her heart. On one hand, she desperately wanted to save them, so she had to choose to believe in Li Xiaotian. On the other hand, her intuition and experience told her that Li Xiaotian was full of lies and she could not easily believe her. However, Tang Zheng had already made his decision, so she put those words back into her stomach. Li Xiaotian secretly heaved a sigh of relief and glanced at Wu complacently. Wu Quan pretended not to see it. His gaze turned, sweeping across the sky Emperor's corpse on the ground, and asked with a frown, "What should we do?" Tang Zheng looked at the stiff Sky Emperor and sighed regretfully. The people from the Imperial Tutor's mansion were truly ruthless, even daring to kill the Sky Emperor, who knew what kind of medicine they were selling in their gourd. A dead person no longer had any value. Tang Zheng waved his hand and said, "Let's go. There's no need to bother with him." However, with the death of the Sky Emperor, the chaos in the island nation will definitely worsen. Let's just sit back and watch the show. Li Xiaotian looked at the Sky Emperor's corpse absent-mindedly, his brows knitted, as though he was thinking about something. Seeing that, Tang Zheng subconsciously stopped in his tracks and asked, "What are you thinking about?" As if waking up from a dream, Li Xiaotian revealed a brilliant smile and said, "Nothing." However, there was still a lingering doubt in the depths of his eyes. The three of them left the scene, leaving behind the Sky Emperor's corpse lying quietly on the ground. The final destination of the ruler of a country was incomparably desolate. The three of them disguised themselves and passed through the crowd. Looking at the parade on the street, the corner of Tang Zheng's mouth couldn't help but curl up. Although his trip to the island nation this time was filled with danger, he had also gained a lot. He had actually turned the island nation upside down, which could be considered a lesson for this country. Suddenly, a commotion came from the crowd in front of him. Immediately, everyone swarmed towards that direction. "What's going on?" The three of them looked at each other, not knowing what had happened. "Why don't we go take a look?" Li Xiaotian suggested. Wu immediately rejected. "No, don't think that we don't know what you're thinking. You want to take advantage of the chaos to escape, right? In order to avoid unnecessary trouble, we will continue to advance towards the Imperial Advisor's residence." Tang Zheng considered for a moment and was about to nod in agreement when he heard a voice coming from afar. This voice is so familiar. He pricked up his ears and looked up. In the distance, he saw a familiar figure speaking passionately in front of a microphone on a huge electronic screen. Damn it! Tang Zheng was flabbergasted as he cursed loudly. Wu and Li Xiaotian's reactions were similar as they stared straight at the person on the screen. Isn't the Emperor dead? Why is he speaking on the screen? What is going on? Looking at the excited reaction of the island nation people, it was clear that this was not a video, but a real person speaking. Especially the mess behind him in the Kokyo, it was clear that he was standing in front of the Kokyo and speaking live. In other words, this was not a video, but a live broadcast. But dozens of minutes ago, they had seen the Emperor die in the hands of Junko with their own eyes. Tang Zheng had personally checked, and could be 100% sure that he was dead. What the hell? Wasn't this the situation? Although they couldn't understand what the other party was saying, it was obvious that after hearing his speech, the emotions of the island nation people gradually calmed down and even cheered thunderously. The Emperor was a spiritual symbol of the island nation. Previously, it was rumored that the Emperor had been captured, and the authorities had always been perfunctory, So the people of the island nation were completely flustered, causing a series of riots. At this moment, after hearing the emperor's speech, he accused the rumors of being a conspiracy of the enemy forces, telling the people not to believe it. Li Xiaotian had been staring at the emperor on the screen. Suddenly, she raised her eyebrows and exclaimed in realization, "I know." "What do you know?" Tang Zheng and Wu immediately turned their heads to look at her. "I know what's going on. No wonder Junko would kill that person without mercy, because that person is not the real emperor," Li Xiaotian said solemnly. Ah, Tang Zheng and Wu were shocked. They didn't understand what she meant. "We've all been deceived. The island nation people are too cunning. They actually pushed out a substitute to block the wind and rain and confuse everyone," Li Xiaotian said hatefully. She had always been the one to lie to others. When had she ever been deceived like this? But this time, she was careless and was actually deceived by a group of island nation people for so long, playing in circles. She was truly furious. Tang Zheng and Wu were not idiots. After thinking about it, they went through all the clues that had led to this. Gradually, they realized that what Li Xiaotian said was probably true. They had really been played by the island nation people. No, not only them, the people of the island nation, and even the people of the entire world had been played by the island nation people. It turned out that the island nation had always nurtured a substitute for the emperor, and when necessary, they would push it out as a scapegoat. The imperial tutor's mansion was clearly aware of this, which was why they killed the scapegoat without hesitation. I was saying that the emperor's body had a hidden illness. How could it be as if nothing had happened? So he was just a fake. The real emperor was the person on the screen. Li Xiaotian pointed at the screen and said fiercely. Tang Zheng once again looked over. Although the emperor's words were sonorous and powerful, as if he was full of spirit, in Tang Zheng's eyes, his spirit was all faked. How could the illness between his brows escape Tang Zheng's fiery eyes? "He is the real emperor. He is really sick," Tang Zheng said. "So the person I've been capturing is a substitute. Damn it. But why did the real emperor not come out a while ago, allowing the country to be in turmoil, but now he came out again?" Wu asked suspiciously. Li Xiaotian laughed coldly and joked. "Your head is too simple. You can't even figure out such a simple question." Wu's face turned cold as he said, "Say that again." Tang Zheng hurriedly dissuaded him and explained, "This is the cunning part of the other party. They know very well that we don't know that we caught an imposter. If the real emperor were to appear, then we would know. Although it's a fake, it's still hard to distinguish between the real emperor and the fake. It's the same for us and for others. If we knew the truth, we could still use the fake in our hands. We could casually broadcast it all over the world and make him admit that he is the real emperor. Then, the dignity of the royal family would be gone. In fact, they would be afraid that we would kill the fake in front of the people. That would be the real deal. Even if they were to push out the real emperor, the people would not completely believe them. In short, only when the fake is confirmed to be dead will the real emperor dare to come out and refute the rumors. The imperial advisor's mansion really played a good hand. They used the news of Wu Junshan and the others to deceive us, and then took the opportunity to kill the emperor, completely destroying the car in our hands. They really put in a lot of effort. Tang Zheng spoke tirelessly, causing Wu to come to a realization. He gradually understood the mystery behind it, and couldn't help but sigh at the cunning of the island nation people. Li Xiaotian, haven't you always been in cahoots with the people of the island nation? Don't tell me you don't know about the matter of the monk? Tang Zheng asked. Li Xiaotian smiled bitterly. This must be the top secret of the island nation. Do you think I would know? Then does that mean that the other information that Junko said is also fake? Master and the others are not in the hands of the imperial advisor's mansion? Wu exclaimed. Tang Zheng's face darkened as he fell into deep thought. To be honest, he was truly unable to determine this point. The imperial advisor's mansion's tricks were too powerful. He was unable to accurately determine which sentence was true and which sentence was false. Li Xiaotian smiled mysteriously and said, "That might not be the case." The imperial advisor personally admitted that he imprisoned Wu Junshan and the others. Really? Tang Zheng was skeptical. I know you don't believe me. As for whether you believe me or not this time, it all depends on you. Li Xiaotian shrugged and said indifferently. Tang Zheng and Wu looked at each other and communicated with their eyes. Wu took a deep breath and said, "Trust her again." Tang Zheng nodded. Li Xiaotian laughed. "Smart, if you don't believe me, then there's no need to go to the Imperial Advisor's mansion. Humph. Since that's the case, then continue leading the way." The three of them continued forward. After passing through the bustling city, they realized that the gathered people had gradually dispersed. All of them had satisfied smiles on their faces. The appearance of the Heavenly Emperor had truly appeased these people. Wu said unwillingly, "Let's go back and get the Heavenly Emperor's corpse. Then, we'll expose it to the public. I wonder if it will cause a bit of a stir." Tang Zheng shook his head. "It's useless, not to mention that the imposter's corpse is definitely long gone. Even if we find it, it's useless. A dead person is not as useful as a living person. This time we've been tricked by the other party. We must be more careful in the future." After saying that, he subconsciously raised his head to look at Li Xiaotian. Li Xiaotian felt his gaze, but remained calm and composed as he walked in front alone. "Li Xiaotian, you have a cooperation with the Imperial Advisor's mansion, and now you are bringing us to the Imperial Advisor's mansion. Aren't you afraid that the Imperial Advisor's mansion will turn hostile and deal with you instead?" Tang Zheng asked curiously. "In any case, I am not on the same path as the Imperial Advisor's mansion. Are you afraid that they will fall out with me?" Li Xiaotian said indifferently. "What kind of place is the Imperial Advisor's mansion? If you go, you will definitely be disappointed, because the Imperial Advisor's mansion is just a small village. It is like a paradise without any outsiders to disturb it. This is a place that many ancient scholars yearn for." However, Tang Zheng frowned and said, "The beautiful appearance often means danger. The more beautiful it is, the more deceptive it is." "Hee, are you hinting at me?" Li Xiaotian covered his mouth and chuckled. "I'll take it as a compliment. This is the most beautiful compliment I've ever heard." "Shameless," Wu complained indignantly. Li Xiaotian turned a deaf ear to him and continued. "Although the Imperial Advisor's mansion is quiet and beautiful, there are dangers hidden within. This is without a doubt. So if you barge in, you must be prepared to sacrifice yourselves. You don't have to worry about it. Just lead the way." Chapter 678. Tang Zheng and Marshal hurriedly looked over. There was chaos in front of them, and a thick fog shrouded them, making it impossible to see the path ahead clearly. "Something strange," Duan Yin said. Tang Zheng looked at Li Xiaotian. Li Xiaotian smiled mysteriously and said, "Of course not anyone can enter the Imperial Tutor's mansion. I am a guest of the Imperial Tutor's mansion, so of course I have the authority." After he finished speaking, he took out a token and pressed it against the whirlpool. The thick fog began to fluctuate violently, and not long after, a small path appeared beneath his feet. "Do you dare to go in?" Li Xiaotian laughed mischievously. Tang Zheng did not say a word and took the lead to walk in with large strides. In fact, this was just a trick, a type of illusion technique. To Tang Zheng, it was not unfamiliar, and it was not that amazing. The key was that Tang Zheng could not predict what kind of danger lay behind the fog. But now that things had come to this, he had no way out. Even if it was a dragon's lair or a tiger's den, he still had to barge in. Marshall followed without hesitation. The corner of Li Xiaotian's mouth hooked up into a meaningful smile and followed behind the two of them. Not long after, the thick fog gradually dissipated, and the scene in front of them suddenly opened up. A quiet village appeared in front of them. Small bridges, flowing water, green grass, shady trees, blue sky, and white clouds. It was as if they had traveled to an ancient paradise. There was no hustle and bustle of modern society, making people feel relaxed and happy. "This is the Imperial Tutor's mansion?" Tang Zheng and Marshall asked in astonishment. "Welcome to the Imperial Tutor's mansion," Li Xiaotian said with a smile. Looking at the sparse houses, Tang Zheng became extremely alert and asked, "Where is the Imperial Tutor?" Li Xiaotian pointed to the deepest part of the village and said, that small wooden house. Tang Zheng suppressed the emotions in his heart and walked over. Marshall and Li Xiaotian also quickly followed. Li Xiaotian rolled his eyes with suspicion and thought, "Why is it so quiet all around? There's not even a sound, and there's not even a shadow." She still remembered the various disciples of the Imperial Preceptor's mansion a few days ago. But today, these people seemed to have evaporated into thin air. Something must be wrong when things are out of the ordinary. However, Li Xiaotian didn't say anything. He just silently followed Tang Zheng, ready to go. The cabin was not far away, and it did not take long for the three of them to arrive in front of it. Tang Zheng subconsciously stopped in his tracks. Circulating his Jinshi, Zhang Xian focused his mind and held his breath. His perception increased rapidly. Someone. A strong breathing sound entered his ears clearly. "Be careful, there's someone," Tang Zheng warned in a low voice. Creak. The Imperial Preceptor's mansion scheme was linked to one another. It was hard to guard against. Even someone as meticulous as Li Xiaotian was not able to see through it. But at this juncture, he couldn't care less about whether or not it was a trap. Since he was in danger, he should make the first move to gain the upper hand. Thus, before he finished speaking, Tang Zheng had already made the first move. With a schwa sound, the War Soul sword pierced towards the opponent's chest. Now that he was killing an enemy, he didn't show any mercy. The War Soul sword's brilliant might caused people's hearts to tremble in fear. Whoosh! A gust of wind blew out from the wooden house. Bang! The gust of wind struck the War Soul sword, and Tang Zheng's attack collapsed. He staggered back a step and looked at the dim wooden house in shock. Who? This person actually escaped his perception. When he circulated his energy to sense again, he still found that the wooden house was empty. However, it was clear that there was an expert hidden inside. Could it be the legendary Imperial Preceptor? Tang Zheng and Marshall looked at each other, both of them guessing this point. The Imperial Preceptor was one of the most mysterious people in the island nation. He was also one of the most powerful people. Such an expert was actually living in seclusion in such a small wooden house. Moreover, before he even saw Lu Shan's true face, Tang Zheng was already intimidated by the other party's casual counterattack. This person's strength is definitely something I've never seen before in my life. Tang Zheng came to a conclusion. This Imperial Preceptor was undoubtedly an expert of the Grandmaster realm. As for what level of Grandmaster he was, it was still impossible to determine. However, Tang Zheng understood that if he was alone, he would definitely not be his match. However, with the four symbols venerable by his side, he was much more confident. He took a step forward and said, "Hiding your head and showing your tail, don't you dare to come out and see me?" Junko mocked. "Who do you think you are? Is the Imperial Preceptor someone you can meet just because you want to? Is that so? Then I'll tear down your little hut and see how you're going to hide." Tang Zheng held onto the War Soul sword with both hands and growled, "Return to origin." He immediately used the fifth move of the Heaven-Flying Immortal, Return to Origin. This was already the pinnacle of the Heaven-Flying Immortal sword technique that he cultivated. In the blink of an eye, the War Soul sword became ordinary and fell towards the small wooden hut. Clang! A clear and melodious sound came out from the small wooden hut, as if a sword had been unsheathed. Tang Zheng's expression turned cold, but his return to origin sword move was not affected in the slightest. Whiz! With a sound of breaking through the air, a cold light shot out and struck the War Soul sword. Clang! An intense spark flew in all directions, and the War Soul sword could no longer fall any further. Taking a closer look, what flew over was actually a sword, but the sword was already covered in dust and was dim. However, when facing the War Soul sword, it was not at a disadvantage at all, and steadily stopped it. Tang Zheng's eyes bulged. He took a deep breath and changed his sword move, the powerful and heavy Heaven-Flying Immortal's fourth move. Heaven Falls Earth Rends was unleashed. Clang! The War Soul sword fiercely slashed onto the nameless sword, causing it to tremble and fall to the ground with a pada sound. Tang Zheng was shaken. The terrifying force that came from the nameless sword was truly not to be underestimated. Let's see what other tricks you have up your sleeve. Tang Zheng once again used his greatsword, determined to destroy the small wooden hut. But just as he raised the war soul sword, 3 piercing sounds resounded through the clouds, and 3 cold beams of light flew over. Damn, why are there so many swords? Tang Zheng thought that the sword just now was the other party's sword, but it was obvious that he was wrong. The 3 arrows that flew over were all different. There were long swords, short swords, and heavy swords. It was impossible for a person to use so many swords. However, the lethality of these 3 swords was extremely terrifying. Left, middle, right, 3 directions firmly locked onto Tang Zheng, leaving him with nowhere to dodge. Tang Zheng's expression was solemn. The war soul sword let out a clear sword cry, buzzing and trembling, as if it was excited to meet an expert. "Break!" Tang Zheng roared, and in the blink of an eye, he attacked 3 times. Wind, rising clouds, surging, sword breaking 1,000 caddies, lightning sparks flint. 3 heaven-flying immortals' sword technique, 3 completely different offensive sword moves, yet they were perfectly fused together. Ding ding dang dang. Sparks flew in all directions. The 3 different swords were all knocked down, but Tang Zheng also staggered back, his arms trembling, and the war soul sword almost fell out of his hands. Junko's face changed. She thought to herself, Tang Zheng is indeed powerful, to be able to receive 2 moves of the Imperial Master's 4 swords, but he did not suffer much damage. But so what? It was still impossible for him to be a match for the Imperial Master. Junko was extremely confident. She stood at the door and looked at Tang Zheng in ridicule. Tang Zheng's face turned pale white. Wu immediately asked in a low voice, "How is it?" "The enemy is tricky. Be careful later," Tang Zheng warned, and then patted Xiao Bai's head. "Xiao Bai, act according to the situation later. Protect Wu well." A gentle light flashed across Wu Wu's eyes. The words of rejection were about to come out of his mouth, but he swallowed them back down. Li Xiaotian looked at the wooden hut with a complicated expression, not knowing what would happen next. Tang Zheng took another step forward, preparing to launch another attack. No matter how powerful the opponent was, for the sake of the whereabouts of Wu Junshan and the rest, he had to give it his all. Chapter 679. You want to destroy this old man's hut? Heh, this is the dream of many people. However, these people often turn into skeletons in the end, leaving behind only their swords that are buried in my sword tomb. The Imperial Advisor's voice was neither fast nor slow, but every syllable was extremely powerful, like a heavy hammer striking one's heart. Sword tomb. Tang Zheng's heart moved. He looked over, and sure enough, there was a huge pit in the dimly lit room, and there were many swords stuck in it. Could it be that those swords just now flew out from the sword tomb? The so-called sword tomb, as the name implied, was the tomb of the sword. According to the Imperial Advisor, these swords were all left behind by the people who challenged him after they died, so they were called sword tomb. Not only were these swords buried, it was also equivalent to burying their original owners. He could vaguely tell that there were over 100 swords in the sword tomb, which meant that there were over 100 people with superb swordsmanship who came to challenge him, and in the end, they all lost their lives. After going through hundreds of battles, it should be nothing more than this. Tang Zheng sighed. So what if it's the sword tomb? What's buried are all dead things. How can it bury people? Tang Zheng said with a resounding voice. Then I'll let you die here. Let's see if you can still boast so shamelessly. The Imperial Advisor said coldly. Just as his voice disappeared, the sword in the sword tomb started to buzz and tremble, as if it had a life of its own. Tang Zheng's face changed. He kept the War Soul sword and switched to using the heaven-shocking bow and the shooting sun arrows. When Li Xiaotian saw the 2 divine armaments, his eyes immediately erupted with a blazing light. He wished that he could immediately snatch them over and take them for himself. Clang, clang, clang. The sharp swords soared into the air and flew out from the sword tomb. They floated in the air as an invisible force controlled them. So. The sharp swords changed their direction and aimed at Tang Zheng. The sound of them tearing through the air was like 10,000 arrows shooting towards Tang Zheng at the same time. Wong. The bowstring vibrated, and the shooting sun arrow at the tip of his finger left his hand. Boom! Kacha! The shooting sun arrows hit the sharp swords, and the sound of breaking rang out one after another. The first few swords broke into pieces and fell to the ground. However, the attack of the shooting sun arrows dissipated because of these swords, and they fell to the ground with a clatter. Tang Zheng was shocked. Last time in the Kokyo, so many people from the island nation were unable to block the shooting sun arrows. But this time, a single sword was able to wear down the shooting sun arrows. This was enough to show how powerful and domineering the Imperial Tutor's attack was. The attacks of the other swords did not slow down at all, and they continued to fly towards him at lightning speed. Tang Zheng didn't have time to feel sorry for the shooting sun arrow on the ground. He continuously pulled the bowstring and released 2 shooting sun arrows at the same time to meet the overwhelming sharp swords. Boom! 2 loud noises were heard, followed by another cracking sound. Tang Zheng did not have the time to appreciate his own battle achievements as he pulled Wu and quickly moved to the side. The sound of something tearing through the air brushed past their ears, and a few cold lights flew past them. If they were still standing there, their bodies would definitely be pierced through. Without a doubt, the result of this attack was already very clear. Tang Zheng had used 3 shooting sun arrows, and although he had destroyed dozens of his opponent's sharp swords, the Imperial Tutor still controlled the remaining sharp swords and almost killed him. The difference in strength was obvious. Even though Tang Zheng had the heaven-shocking bow and the shooting sun arrows, he was still unable to gain the upper hand. This Imperial Tutor is at least at the 6th level of the Grandmaster stage. Tang Zheng guessed with his own experience. For a small country to be able to cultivate to such a level, he could already be considered to have reached the peak. It could also be seen how astonishing his talent was. Meeting such a genius, and a veteran genius at that, Tang Zheng's pressure increased exponentially. Only now did he understand why the Imperial Tutor was so calm and confident. Because the other party did have the ability. Looking at the shooting sun arrows that had fallen to the ground not far away, Tang Zheng was in pain. If this thing fell into the hands of the other party, it would be a huge loss. As if they had a tacit understanding, Xiao Bai jumped down from Tang Zheng's shoulder and turned into a white light as it rushed into the house. "Oomph, you little thing, do you still dare to come and die?" The Imperial Tutor did not take it seriously at all and said with a murderous aura. The broken sword fragments on the ground rose into the air and turned into specks of cold light, shooting towards Xiao Bai from all directions, as if they wanted to turn it into a hedgehog. Xiao Bai's eyes flashed with a red light as it squeaked and opened its mouth. Boom! Flames soared into the sky, and the broken sword fragments in all directions were completely enveloped by the flames. They fell to the ground one after another, and some even melted into a pool of molten iron. The flames spread in all directions and quickly ignited the wooden walls. The small house immediately turned into a sea of fire. The Imperial Tutor and Junko obviously did not expect this situation. Junko was stunned, and only the raging flames were left in her eyes. The Imperial Preceptor let out an angry roar. A figure soared into the sky from the flames, and then landed heavily on the ground, causing the ground to tremble. The small wooden house had turned into a sea of fire, and the sword tomb in the center of the sea of fire had also turned into a mess. A white light rushed out of the flames and fell on Tang Zheng's head, and there were 3 shooting sun arrows in its mouth. Tang Zheng patted Xiao Bai's head approvingly, and under Li Xiaoyan's reluctant gaze, he put away the shooting sun arrows. Then he looked up and saw a short old man at the edge of the sea of fire. It was the Imperial Tutor. He didn't look like a grandmaster at all. Instead, he looked like an ordinary old man. He had a thin body and white hair. Even his back was a little stooped, which made his already small body look even smaller and weaker. If they met such a person on the road, many people would even curl their lips in disdain and stay away from him. No one would regard him as a master of a generation. But at this moment, in front of experts like Tang Zheng, the lethality contained in this thin body made them not dare to underestimate him. They even felt a little scared. The imperial tutor's eyes were very small, almost narrowed into slits. He stared straight at Tang Zheng and Xiaobai on his shoulder. What kind of demonic beast is this? It can breathe fire and destroy my sword tomb. Tang Zheng patted Xiaobai's head, looked at the imperial tutor, and said jokingly, "Didn't you always want to be a coward? Now that your turtle shell has been burned, I want to see how you'll hide your head and show your tail." The imperial tutor was unable to restrain his anger. His eyes almost popped out of their sockets, but his eyes suddenly turned and he revealed a mysterious smile. "Tang Zheng, your empty words are useless. So what if my sword tomb is destroyed? With you, I don't need this bluffing sword tomb." The imperial tutor's words caused Tang Zheng's expression to change. He asked, "What do you mean?" Li Xiaotian had already guessed the imperial tutor's intentions. He suddenly realized, "So you used me as bait to lure them here for Tang Zheng? For me?" Tang Zheng was confused. For a moment, he couldn't figure out what he had that was worth coveting. The imperial tutor's cultivation was truly very high, far surpassing Tang Zheng's. What could he possibly want? The imperial tutor glanced at Li Xiaotian and sighed. The holy maiden of the Li Palace truly has an outstanding mind. You've so quickly guessed my intentions. Tang Zheng, do you still not understand your own value? Tang Zheng had already faintly guessed a few things. He speculated, the island nation's ninjutsu is only half-baked. It was born from Huaxia's magic. Could it be that you've taken a fancy to my identity as a cultivator and want to dig out the secrets of magic from me? Haha, as expected of an outstanding youth. As expected, you're not an idiot. You've guessed correctly. You're more valuable than anyone else here. Because you're a cultivator, you've systematically learned magic. The island nation's ninjutsu, with the support of the essence of these magic, will rapidly rise, develop, and become even more powerful. The imperial tutor didn't hide anything and admitted without restraint. Tang Zheng's heart jumped. He actually guessed correctly. This imperial tutor really had a good plan. His plan was so far-sighted that it was unexpected. Just like what the imperial tutor had said, if the island nation's ninjutsu had the essence of Huaxia's magic, then there would definitely be a qualitative leap. For such a nation, if they were given the opportunity to increase their strength, then their self-confidence would also increase. In the end, they would definitely bully the weak and even start a war. This was the nature of this nation. Dogs can't change their habit of eating shit. Even if you catch me, I won't reveal half a word to you. Tang Zheng said resolutely. The imperial tutor didn't mind. He faintly smiled and said, "You don't need to speak. I have my own ways to know the information in your mind." Tang Zheng was shocked. He immediately remembered the soul-searching technique. This kind of magic wasn't too difficult. There were also many mysterious ninjutsu techniques. Perhaps there was a similar magic to the soul-searching technique. Therefore, as long as Tang Zheng fell into the hands of the imperial tutor, no matter how tight his mouth was, it would be useless. Tang Zheng fiercely stared at the imperial tutor. Looking at the confidence between his eyebrows, Tang Zheng gnashed his teeth in hatred. The opponent's plan was too accurate. One step after another, inviting him to fall into the trap. Tang Zheng unconsciously fell into the trap. "Miss Li, when you go back this time, please pass on my gratitude to your palace master. Without you, it will be impossible for me to capture Tang Zheng and complete the great plan that I have dreamed of for so many years." The state preceptor said happily, as if victory was already in his grasp. Li Xiaotian looked at Tang Zheng with a complicated expression. She couldn't help but feel a sense of powerlessness. She had always thought that her plan was flawless. This time, the island nation suffered a fatal Waterloo. The older, the wiser. In front of the state preceptor, this old ginger, her scheme seemed a little too immature. Li Xiaotian, you also didn't think that there would be such a result, right? Let me tell you, if he really captured me and let him know the secret of Huaxia's magic and then combined it with ninjutsu, do you think that your martial arts would be a match for his ninjutsu? At that time, when you kill all the cultivators, that will be the time for the island nation to make a comeback. Tang Zheng said jokingly. Li Xiaotian's face was very ugly. She slowly said, I also didn't think that it would turn out like this. She was a little regretful. She was very clear about the ambition of the island nation. There was a huge deviation in the mission that the palace master gave her. She didn't know if the palace master knew the current situation. Chapter 680. At this point, there was no turning back. No matter how much Li Xiaotian regretted, it was useless as he hung his head dejectedly as if he was grieving for his parents. Tang Zheng had already secretly circulated his innate qi and warned Marshall in a low voice. Wait a moment. I will delay the imperial teacher. You escape first. Marshall remained unmoved as she stared straight at the imperial advisor. With a shout, she had already rushed out first. Tang Zheng fiercely stomped his foot. Marshall was good at everything, but she was often impulsive and rushed forward. Wasn't it precisely these qualities that separated her from Li Xiaotian? Both of them were important members of the mysterious organization, but Marshall's straightforwardness was completely different from Li Xiaotian's craftiness. This caused Tang Zheng to unknowingly have a good impression of Marshall and gradually develop hatred towards Li Xiaotian. Marshall rushed forward and closed in on the imperial teacher in the blink of an eye, but the imperial teacher did not even put her in his eyes. How dare you? A graceful figure blocked in front of the imperial teacher as Junko stared at Marshall with a frosty expression. She extended her arm, and the autumn water sword was already swinging with sword chi as it pierced towards Marshall. Marshall waved her hand, and the roaring flame blade brought forth a string of raging flames. The air surged as she fought fiercely with Junko. The imperial teacher passed by the two and walked straight towards Tang Zheng. He smiled and said, Don't make any unnecessary resistance. The one who will suffer will be you. If you are willing to submit to me, I can let bygones be bygones. In the future, you will be able to reach a position above millions of people. This is something that many people dream of. Above millions of people. I'm afraid that I will be below you. Tang Zheng sneered. Of course, everyone will be restricted, and you are no exception. However, this is already a supreme power. The imperial teacher said, as if it was a matter of course. You really have an extraordinarily big ambition. Tang Zheng sighed as his guess was not wrong. The imperial teacher had the ambition of a wolf, and was probably no different from those who started the war. The people of the island nation indeed had wild ambitions hidden in their hearts. Once they had the chance, they would unreservedly reveal them. Thank you for the compliment. This is the long-cherished wish of the island nation's ancestors. Of course, I have the obligation and responsibility to help them achieve it. The imperial tutor said proudly. Tang Zheng gritted his teeth, unable to refute. With a thought, he shouted, Then we'll talk about it after you pass this test. Boom! The gigantic body of the four symbols venerable immediately appeared. Both of its feet landed on the ground, causing the ground to tremble incessantly. Even a nearby stream splashed up. The imperial advisor raised his head to look at the four symbols' lords. His face was slightly astonished as he exclaimed, Is this the giant that wreaked havoc in the imperial palace? Even missiles can't hurt it. It's really extraordinary. After pausing for a moment, greed flooded the grand preceptor's eyes. He stared at the four symbols venerable with scorching light and said, Huaxia really does have a deep heritage. Even you have the fortune to obtain something so powerful. If I can obtain it, I'll be even more powerful. Tang Zheng's pupils constricted. His opponent was really bold. He was actually thinking about the four symbols venerable again. You'll have to have the ability to do so first, Tang Zheng said coldly. The four symbols venerable was his greatest reliance. He had faced many Grandmaster-level experts and was able to escape unscathed all because of the four symbols venerable. However, he could clearly sense that the four symbols venerable was not in its best condition after summoning it this time. A few days ago in the Imperial Palace, the four symbols venerable was hit by missiles. Even Tang Zheng vomited blood. The four symbols venerable was damaged. Later on, Tang Zheng was unable to find a way to completely repair the four symbols venerable, which led to the current sequelae. He had originally planned to properly repair the four symbols venerable after returning to the country. He did not expect to have to use it again so soon. Would the damaged four symbols venerable be able to withstand the Imperial Advisor? Tang Zheng had no idea. This battle was the most uneasy he had ever been in so many battles. Not only did it concern his personal survival, but it also concerned the lives of martial artists, Wu Junshan, and the others. The weight of the responsibility on his shoulders was unprecedentedly heavy. It was so heavy that he could barely breathe. The Imperial Advisor was not intimidated by the four symbols venerable. He strode over and said, "Then let me see its battle prowess." Evidently, he was exceptionally confident in his own strength. Tang Zheng jumped onto the four symbols venerable without a word and disappeared into its chest. Xiao Bai also jumped onto the four symbols venerable shoulder. It bared its teeth at the Imperial Advisor, its battle intent soaring. The Imperial Advisor stood with his hands behind his back. He tapped the ground with the tip of his foot and shot into the air, charging straight at the four symbols venerable. The four symbols venerable dodged nimbly. However, it was too big in the end and could not evade in time. The Imperial Advisor's foot landed on its chest. Boom! Tang Zheng felt as if an earthquake had struck. He was on the verge of collapsing as a sharp ringing sound in his ears almost tore his eardrums apart. Even though Tang Zheng had expected this, he was still shocked by the might of a single attack. He only cultivated a half-baked ninjutsu. How could he have such power? Tang Zheng was indignant. However, he also understood that it was definitely because the other party's talent was too great. He must be a genius of all kinds. Tang Zheng was not wrong. Everyone in the Imperial Advisor's residence was very talented. They were all outstanding figures who far surpassed ordinary people. They were geniuses elected by the entire nation. The Imperial Advisor was a genius among geniuses. It was not hard to imagine how powerful they were. It could be said that Huaxia was lacking in this aspect. There were many sects, each of them fighting openly and covertly. The internal friction was too severe. Island Nation had few people and land, but it could not stop the other party's internal and external unity. They used the entire nation's power to cultivate talents. Naturally, their results were extraordinary. Tang Zheng did not have time to sigh because the Imperial Advisor rushed up again. This time, he did not use the tip of his foot, but his finger aimed at the venerable four symbols chest. The Imperial Advisor was very smart. He did not attack the other parts of the venerable four symbols. He understood that the venerable four symbols' body was impenetrable, so he deliberately chose the chest. This was where Tang Zheng had disappeared. The door in the chest was definitely the venerable four symbols' life gate. His choice was correct. When Tang Zheng saw the rapidly approaching finger, he subconsciously placed his fists in front of his chest. Boom! The finger touched the venerable four symbols' fist. A puff of green smoke rose. A white spot was left on the fist as if it had been burned. A white spot. Tang Zheng looked at it in shock, as his heart was in turmoil. The four divine beasts had fought with him so many times, but no matter if it was swords, blades, guns, or even missiles, none of them were able to leave a single mark on the four divine beasts. But this time, he had miscalculated. The Imperial Advisor's seemingly light finger actually left a white spot. It was completely possible to imagine the destructive power contained in that finger. So large and so nimble. What a great treasure. The Imperial Advisor's thoughts became more and more heated. You can block me once, but can you block me this time? He raised his arm, and his expression became abnormally cold. Killing intent filled his body. Tang Zheng guarded his mind and focused all his attention. However, he did not see the Imperial Advisor's next move. He could not help but feel puzzled. Why was he bluffing like this? Was he trying to show off? Of course not. Li Xiaotian had also been observing the Imperial Advisor. From his attacks, she came to a shocking conclusion. The Imperial Advisor's strength was not inferior to Li Palace's palace master, Granny Li. One had to know that Li Palace was one of the three great mysterious organizations. The other clans could not compare. As the master of Li Palace, Granny Li's strength was obvious. However, this bullshit Imperial Advisor of small country was actually not inferior to Granny Li. This was too shocking. No wonder he said so confidently that he could deal with Wu Junshan and the others. Looks like he was not lying. But isn't there Lan Yu by Wu Junshan's side? Her cultivation is not inferior to Wu Junshan's. Could it be that the two of them together are still not his match? Li Xiaotian could almost hear the sound of her heart beating because this guess was too shocking. If the Imperial Advisor was really so powerful, then he could directly kill his way to Huaxia. No one could stop him because he was practically invincible. No, I must be mistaken somewhere. Li Xiaotian hurriedly shook her head, denying this absurd idea. If he was really so powerful, why would he be so obsessed with Tang Zheng's technique? Therefore, there must be some secret behind this that she did not know. However, if he was not so powerful, then how could Wu Junshan and the others fall into his hands? Li Xiaotian felt a headache coming on. Even someone as smart as her could not figure it out. Pong! Suddenly, a loud sound interrupted her thoughts and pulled her back to the real world. She subconsciously turned her head to look. The battle between Junko and Marshall had already reached its climax. Junko had the Autumn Water Sword, which was obviously a treasure sword, causing Junko to be like a tiger that had grown wings. Marshall's Roaring Flame Blade was also very powerful, but after all, it was a pair of hands. Compared to ordinary swords, it was not at a disadvantage. However, in front of the Autumn Water Sword, they would suffer a loss after a long battle. Therefore, Marshall gradually retreated, feeling that it was difficult for him to hold on alone. Li Xiaotian's expression was very ugly. Although she did not get along with Marshall, they were both from Huaxia. Being bullied by an island nation girl like this, she found it difficult to calm down. However, she did not lend a helping hand. The current situation was too delicate. Tang Zheng and Marshall were both at a disadvantage. If she joined the battle, it would be useless. Instead, she would put herself in a dangerous situation. Li Xiaotian was an absolutely calm person. Before doing anything, she had to weigh the pros and cons, hoping to maximize her benefits and reduce the danger. At this moment, it was obviously not a wise decision to lend a helping hand. Suddenly, a trace of splendor appeared in her eyes. She looked at Marshall in disbelief and muttered to herself, "How can this be? What kind of martial arts is this?" At this moment, Marshall had already undergone a huge change. She had already stopped retreating. Her palms flew up as if they had turned into flames. This is definitely not the Roaring Flame Blade. The Roaring Flame Blade is not like this. Li Xiaotian's mouth twitched as she could not help but exclaim. She could clearly feel the power contained within the palms. It was not something the Roaring Flame Blade could compare to. The key point was that she had never heard of such a martial arts technique. This meant that it was not a martial arts technique. Then where did she learn it from? Li Xiaotian's heart was in a mess. Chapter 681, Dark Flame Divine Palm, the martial arts manual that Tang Zheng took out from the first floor of Langyu Pavilion. Back then, he took out a total of 2 things from the first floor of Langyu Pavilion. In addition to this martial arts manual, there was also a mysterious box. Wu Zue had been immersed in practicing the Inferno Divine Palm for some time now, but she had never used it properly. At this moment, the Roaring Flame Saber was no longer enough to deal with Junko, so she had no choice but to use the Dark Flame Divine Palm. The Dark Flame Divine Palm and the Roaring Flame Saber had something in common. They both cultivated the inner strength to become more overbearing. However, the Dark Flame Divine Palm was clearly superior. This was the understanding that Wu had since she started cultivating. It was precisely because the Dark Flame Divine Palm was too overbearing that it was especially difficult to cultivate. Although she had been cultivating for so long, she had not completely grasped the essence of the Dark Flame Divine Palm. At this point, she could not care so much. She circulated the Dark Flame Divine Palm's mental cultivation method, and her palms immediately turned fiery red, as if they had turned into flames. The surrounding air rippled, as if it was producing dense qi. Junko's face was cold as she stared at this scene. She knew that the opponent had changed their martial arts. Although they had not exchanged blows yet, she could already tell that this martial arts manual was extraordinary. Junko was not afraid. After all, their cultivation levels were similar. Of course, even if they changed their martial arts, how powerful could it be? The autumn water sword swung through the air, and with a sharp sound, it pierced towards Wu. Wu's cheeks also turned crimson. Her entire body seemed to be burning as she pushed her palms forward. Waves of heat rolled, as if an invisible flame was gushing out from her palms, wanting to burn everything in the world. Bang! Her palms once again slapped the autumn water sword. The autumn water sword immediately turned fiery red, as if it had been melted by the high temperature. Ah! Junko could not help but let out a scream. Her palms felt as if they were on fire, and she subconsciously wanted to let go. However, her firm willpower stopped this stupid instinctive impulse. She hurriedly retreated while circulating her inner strength to counteract the heat in her palms. Seeing that the opponent retreated after one strike, without any of the previous aggressiveness, Wu's spirit was greatly aroused. With a low roar, she pounced forward like a fierce tiger descending the mountain. Li Xiaotian was dumbstruck at this scene and muttered to himself, "How can she be so powerful?" Yes, even with her experience, it was hard to imagine that Wu could turn the situation around in the blink of an eye and completely suppress Junko. If it was her, she would definitely not be able to do this. She stared at Marshall's palm with burning eyes and said, "Everything is strange because of the martial arts she cultivates. Who gave her this set of martial arts?" Suddenly, her heart moved, and her eyes turned, locking onto Tang Zhang. Could it be him? He was 100% sure that the martial sect did not have this set of techniques, so with the experience and connections of the martial sect, only Tang Zhang could do this. Isn't he a cultivator? Shouldn't he be holding spells and cultivation manuals? How can he martial arts manual? She was puzzled. Of course, she did not expect that the dragon seal on Tang Zhang's forehead could directly reach a treasure trove like Langya Pavilion. Li Xiaotian could not help but feel a trace of jealousy. Back then, she had been in contact with Tang Zhang for more days than Wu. Furthermore, they had gone through trials and tribulations together in the 10,000 Mountains. If she did not become enemies with him because of his identity as a cultivator, then wouldn't this martial arts manual be hers? At that moment, she was a little jealous of Wu. How could Wu have such good luck? She came from behind and obtained such a huge benefit. She had mixed feelings, but she quickly threw these emotions out of her mind. That was because the battle between Tang Zhang and the Imperial Tutor had undergone a drastic change. The Imperial Tutor raised his arm even higher. Tang Zhang had not figured out the other party's intentions, but Li Xiaotian had already seen some clues. She looked at the stream behind the Imperial Tutor in shock. The stream seemed to be controlled by a terrifying force and had already stopped flowing. Crash! The stream suddenly soared into the air, turning into droplets of water. The droplets passed by the Imperial Tutor and shot straight towards the four symbols Venerable. The water droplets condensed into lines that were like thousands of sharp swords. Thousands of swords shot out at the same time, slashing towards the four symbols Venerable. The four symbols Venerable's huge body had nowhere to hide. Tang Jing also instantly realized the other party's intentions. Too powerful, he actually managed to draw the stream's water into swords. The four symbols Venerable hurriedly placed one hand in front of his chest to protect himself. His other hand clenched into a fist and punched out. The air crackled like a sudden clap of thunder as a shockwave was sent forward. Boom, boom, boom. The shockwave struck the water swords, which immediately turned into droplets of water that scattered down. However, there were still some water swords that slipped through the net and ruthlessly slashed at the four symbols Venerable's chest and arm. Sword after sword. The huge force caused the four symbols Venerable to almost lose his balance. His huge body was on the verge of collapse. Tang Zheng could clearly sense the rumbling coming from the four symbols Venerable's chest. It was like a sledgehammer had struck his arm, but it was also clearly transmitted through his arm to his chest. Yeah, you can block it once, but can you block it a second time or a third time? Doesn't your Huaxia have a saying that dripping water penetrates a stone? Today, I can test this saying, the imperial tutor proudly said, a faint and savage smile appearing on his face. Dripping water penetrates a stone. Tang Zheng was shaken. Wasn't the imperial tutor planning to use the soft to conquer the hard? Dripping water penetrates a stone was not a legend. If the imperial tutor was allowed to continue his attacks, it was unknown whether this seemingly invulnerable four symbols Venerable would be able to endure. Li Xiaotian had clearly seen this point, and her eyes grew more and more complicated. At this moment, Tang Zheng's defeat was of no benefit to her. The imperial tutor was clearly more ambitious than Tang Zheng, and also more skilled at scheming. If the imperial tutor grew stronger, it would definitely do more harm than good to Huaxia and the Li Palace. Previously, she had been prepared to remain uninvolved, but the appearance of the Inferno Divine Palm made her realize that Tang Zheng was a massive treasure trove. If it fell into the imperial tutor's hands for nothing, it would be letting the imperial tutor own this treasure trove, which would be letting him off too easily. Lend a hand to Tang Zheng. A voice emerged from the bottom of her heart, but she did not rashly attack. The imperial tutor was too powerful, and with her meager abilities, the slightest carelessness would result in her being beheaded. She did not believe that at this crucial moment, the imperial tutor would care about her status as the holy maiden of the Li Palace. She stared at the battle, searching for an opportunity to strike. The four symbols Venerable had already become a drowned rat. Its entire body was soaked, and even Xiao Bai on its shoulder was soaked. It fiercely shook its thin and small body, sending droplets of water into the air. It grinned and let out a long squeak. Tang Zheng knew that it was truly enraged, so he shouted, "Xiao Bai, attack!" In order to break the imperial tutor's attempt to break through the stone with dripping water, he could only use Xiao Bai as an elite force. Xiao Bai obeyed, and its squeaks suddenly became sharp and resounding. It raised its head and expanded its chest, its small mouth raised high. Its eyes turned fiery red, and the droplets of water on its body instantly evaporated. Boom! A fireball was spat out of its small mouth. However, this fireball did not rapidly fly forward. Instead, it floated in front of the four symbols Venerable, constantly spinning as it absorbed the surrounding air. Gradually, the fireball began to grow at a visible rate. Fiery red replaced the color in front of it, and as far as the eye could see, everything was fiery red. When the water swords struck this ball of fire, they immediately evaporated into water vapor, finding it difficult to harm the four symbols Venerable in the slightest. The imperial tutor's expression flickered at this sight, and he angrily said, "A little brat wants to influence the battle? Die!" Swoosh! Thousands of water swords suddenly condensed into a line, forming a gigantic water sword. With the stream as the source, it slashed at the fireball. Squeak! Whitey raised its neck and cried out loudly. Its snow-white fur immediately underwent an earth-shattering change, completely turning into a fiery red color. It was as if it had turned into a ball of fire. Boom! The water sword slashed at the fireball. Sparks and water splattered in all directions, overflowing with light and color. It was extremely beautiful. However, this beauty contained an earth-shattering danger. It was evident from the surrounding vegetation that was hit by the water droplets and sparks. The vegetation looked as if it had been shot by a machine gun and was in a complete mess. If a person was hit, the outcome would not be much better. The Imperial Tutor's expression was a little strange. He suddenly pointed his finger forward, and the stream water bubbled and boiled, quickly adding into the water sword. The fireball was sent flying backwards, almost crashing into the body of the four symbols Venerable. Immediately, the Imperial Tutor revealed a smug look and said, "Now you know what it means to be a mantis trying to stop a chariot, right?" Xiaobai ignored the Imperial Tutor's mockery. It yelled and leaped off the four symbols Venerable's shoulder, crashing straight into the ball of fire. Xiaobai. Tang Zheng turned pale with fright and could not help but cry out. He had never seen Xiaobai use this move as if he was facing a great enemy. He did not know what this move meant or if there was any danger. Seeing Xiaobai being engulfed by the flames, Tang Zheng was also enraged. He roared at the top of his lungs, "I'll fight it out with you." He took a deep breath, and true qi began to circulate wildly in his veins. In an instant, the air around his body began to vibrate, and his bones began to crackle. His hair and beard stood on end, and he looked like a mad lion. His eyes were bloodshot as he glared at the Imperial Tutor. Kachak! Tang Zheng clenched his fists so tightly that his fingernails almost sank into his flesh. At the same time, the four symbols Venerable also clenched his fists and stomped his feet on the ground. The stone slabs on the ground immediately cracked and shattered into pieces. "Kill!" Tang Zheng roared furiously. The four symbols Venerable's huge body was like a cannonball that had been fired, charging straight at the Imperial Tutor. The four symbols Knight passed through the fireball and the water sword and charged directly at the Imperial Tutor's body. Two huge fists were like two meteors flying from outer space. They whistled through the air and smashed directly at the Imperial Tutor's head. The Imperial Tutor's expression changed drastically. He could deal with Tang Zheng with ease because he was fully focused on attacking. At the moment, he was fully focused on the water sword, but he dared not underestimate Tang Zheng's frenzied attacks. Chapter 682. The four symbols Venerable rushed in front of the State Preceptor. The State Preceptor crossed his hands, and a broken sword suddenly appeared in his hand. Yes, he was holding a broken sword in his hand. As if facing a great enemy, he frowned. He raised the broken sword in his hand high and casually slashed at the four symbols Venerable. Boom! The water sword exploded and was turned into water vapor by the fireball, disappearing without a trace. The ball of flame trembled and fell to the ground. The flame was extinguished, revealing Xiaobai's thin body. Its fur turned snow-white again, and the spirit in its eyes had clearly weakened. It looked at the back of the four symbols Venerable and grinned, as if saying that it had done its best. Taking advantage of this opportunity, the four symbols Venerable's huge fist had already reached the State Preceptor's head. The powerful pressure caused the ground to cave in, and the State Preceptor fell into the pit, drowning his short figure. Clang! Suddenly, the broken sword rose from the pit and collided with the huge fist. The soil around the pit immediately flew out, as if it had been affected by a huge shockwave. Tang Zheng clenched his teeth and pressed his fist down a little, completely sealing the top of the pit and burying the State Preceptor in it. State Preceptor! Seeing this, Junko let out a heart-wrenching scream, and her movements involuntarily slowed by half a beat. She had been forced to retreat step by Wu, and was surrounded by dangers. Now that her movements were half a beat slower, Wu immediately seized this rare opportunity. Bang! The Inferno Underworld palm imprinted on Junko's chest, and she flew back like a kite with a broken string. She crashed into the stream, splashing water droplets all over the sky. Wu took advantage of the opportunity to give her a fatal blow, but when she caught up to Junko, she saw her fingers moving, forming a complicated hand seal. Junko revealed a strange smile to Wu, and in the next second, she disappeared. Escape technique. Wu fiercely stomped her foot. She was still a step too late. Junko had this strange escape technique, so it was easier said than done to kill her. She hurriedly turned her head to look in the direction of Tang Zheng. The guardian of four symbols' giant fist had already sealed off the crater. There was no movement in the crater, as if the Grand Preceptor had been suffocated to death. "What's going on?" Tang Zheng frowned and carefully moved the four symbols' venerable's fist away. "Huh?" The crater was empty. Not even a shadow could be seen. "Shit." Tang Zheng's heart skipped a beat, and he cursed in his heart. The Imperial Preceptor had also used the Earth Escape technique, and it was obvious that he had long escaped from the huge pit. But he definitely wouldn't run away. This was his headquarters. Tang Zheng suddenly had an ominous premonition and subconsciously turned his head to look. His pupils involuntarily widened as he screamed, "Wu, be careful behind you!" Wu Jingran was shocked and slapped backward with his palm. The Fire Underworld Divine Palm was more than enough to deal with Junko, but after all, Wu Jingran had not cultivated the Fire Underworld Divine Palm to the peak. Therefore, this seemingly tyrannical palm did not cause any waves and was easily dissolved by the Imperial Preceptor behind him. The Imperial Preceptor had used the Earth Escape technique to escape behind Wu Jingran, and then took the opportunity to launch a sneak attack. How could Wu Jingran be his opponent? Wu Jingran fell into the Imperial Preceptor's palm, and the broken sword was placed on her neck, forming a sharp contrast with her white and tender skin. The Imperial Preceptor's head popped out from behind Wu Jingran, and he clicked his tongue and said, "Tang Zheng, you are really powerful, far beyond my expectations. Whether it is you, this huge monster, or that little guy, you have all broadened my horizons." "Imperial Preceptor, what are you doing?" Tang Zheng was unable to restrain his anger as he asked. "Hey, don't you know what I want to do? If you obediently surrender, then I will let her go. Otherwise, I will let you watch her die. In any case, she is of no use to me. If I kill her, then kill her. It is not a pity at all," the Imperial Advisor said with a murderous aura, as if the broken sword in his hand could cut Wu's throat at any time. "You." Tang Zheng was flustered and exasperated, but he was speechless. This was a battlefield, cruel, and the slightest mistake would cause the situation to take a turn for the worse. However, in the end, Tang Zheng did not expect that the Imperial Preceptor, a Grandmaster of a generation, would actually use someone else to threaten Tang Zheng. This was not the bearing of a Grandmaster of a generation. Obviously, the Imperial Preceptor was a person who was guided by his goals. As long as he could achieve his goals, the process and methods were not important. "I will count to 3. If you don't come out from there, I will immediately kill her in front of you," the Imperial Preceptor threatened. Without a doubt, he was not bluffing, so Tang Zheng did not dare to be careless and immediately shouted, "No, I'll come out. Don't worry about me." Wu shouted loudly, "Be good, you can't die." Tang Zheng advised, "If you come out, both of us will die. But I can't watch you die without doing anything. Then I'll die immediately. You don't have to be threatened anymore," Marshall said resolutely. Then, with a tilt of his neck, he slashed towards the broken sword. "Haha, are you courting death? It's not that easy." The Imperial Preceptor tapped on Marshall's body, and her acupoints were immediately sealed. She could no longer move and could not even commit suicide. Marshall could not help but reveal a look of despair as he roared with a heart-wrenching voice, "If you have the guts, then kill me." Hee, if Tang Zheng doesn't do as I say, I will definitely kill you without hesitation," the Imperial Preceptor said with a smile. "I'll start counting 1. As soon as this number came out, Tang Zheng immediately jumped out of the four symbols' venerable's body and shouted, "Don't kill her, I'm out." When he jumped down from the four symbols' venerable, he immediately put him into the Sumeru pouch. Seeing that, the Imperial Preceptor's eyes immediately burned with passion. He sized up Tang Zheng from head to toe like a monster looking at Tang Seng's meat, wishing that he could immediately pounce on him and eat him. Why are you doing this? For me, it's not worth it. Marshall's emotions were extremely complicated. He was both regretful and moved. If he did not drag him down, then Tang Zheng would not have been threatened. At this moment, she hated herself to the core. She had never hated herself so much before. She was too useless and would only drag him down. Why didn't she just die? Tang Zheng forced a smile. How could I just watch you die? What's so scary about death? At most, I'll accompany you. Marshall's emotions rose and fell. His eyes became moist, and he really had the urge to cry. In this world, other than master and mistress, no one had ever treated her so well. They didn't even care about their own lives for her. If I have a next life, I'll still be your woman. She silently made up her mind in her heart. In this life, she had already decided to follow Tang Zheng, and that was to be his woman, even though this was a promise she had made to Tang Zheng. But at this moment, her heart had completely melted. She was truly devoted to him. Not only in this life, but also in the next life, she wanted to chase after him and be his woman. Marshall didn't know much about love, but there was one thing she understood very well. If a person was willing to risk his life for her, then she would be willing to follow him wholeheartedly. All of this was so simple. There weren't so many reasons, nor were there so many grand things about love. Simple, direct, straightforward. When Li Xiaotian saw this scene, she couldn't help but feel a little jealous of Marshall. Her thoughts were even more meticulous than Marshall, but she also understood how difficult it was for a man to sacrifice his life for a woman. This kind of thing was almost extinct. But Wu's luck was too good. He had met someone like Tang Zheng, just like that. She was a little annoyed and felt that she was a little pitiful. She had schemed and schemed everywhere. But in the end, what she got was far less than a careless and foolish woman like Wu. No, I want more. If others have it, I want it too. If others don't have it, I want it too. Li Xiaotian silently clenched his fists. It's truly moving. You're actually willing to give up your life for her. The imperial advisor laughed in surprise and said disdainfully, Is this the love that you young people are talking about? Haha, love is just a superfluous thing. It will only make people emotional and turn them into fools. In the end, the one who will suffer is themselves. Tang Zheng didn't know if this was love, but one thing was certain. For her, Marshall did not hesitate to take the risk and forcefully charge into the imperial palace to save him. At the same time, he could do the same. Was this love? He didn't care what it was. What he wanted to do was to find every opportunity to save Marshall from the imperial advisor's hands. Wu Mingliang blinked her eyes. The word love made her heart beat violently. She couldn't help but ask herself, was this really love? Love, what an ethereal thing. She had never hoped for it, nor even thought about it. She stared straight at Tang Zheng, as if she wanted to discern the answer from his face. But Tang Zheng didn't have the mood to think about this. He walked towards the imperial advisor with large strides, but in the end, he stopped a few meters away. The imperial advisor frowned and scolded. What are you stopping for? Do you want her to die? Tang Zheng remained unmoved and said resolutely, I know what you want the most. He pointed to his own head. You want the knowledge in my mind, but if I die immediately, do you think you have a way to take these things out of a dead person's head? What do you mean? The imperial advisor had a bad premonition and hurriedly asked. Tang Zheng revealed a brilliant smile. His two neat rows of snow-white teeth were extremely beautiful, giving Marshall a dazzling feeling, causing his heart to palpitate. Although I can't control you, I can control myself. If I were to commit suicide immediately, would you still be able to get what you want? The state preceptor's eyes suddenly widened as he shouted, Stop! Obviously, he didn't expect Tang Zheng to be so ruthless to him and even dare to kill him. This was a trait that almost no one possessed. Whether or not you stop depends on you. Tang Zheng's smile was still clean and bright, like sunlight shining into the bottom of Marshall's heart. Her heart seemed to melt as tears welled up in her eyes. Ever since she was young, she had never shed tears for a man. In fact, she had never shed tears at all. No matter how difficult the situation was, she would grit her teeth and endure it. Chapter 683. The imperial tutor had already guessed Tang Zheng's intentions and said, "You want me to let her go? Smart." Tang Zheng praised. "But if I let her go, wouldn't you regain your freedom?" The imperial tutor said unwillingly. Tang Zheng smiled but did not say anything. It was obvious that he had the imperial tutor in his grasp. The state preceptor's small eyes narrowed into slits as he stared at Tang Zheng, his eyeballs rolling around in circles. Suddenly, he said in a clear voice, "All right, I promise you. Let her go." Tang Zheng was overjoyed. The move that he came up with in a hurry was indeed effective. But before he could be happy, he heard the imperial tutor continue, "But I am not an idiot. I will let you go." "What do you mean?" Tang Zheng's eyelids twitched. The imperial tutor's eyes flashed with a hint of sternness as he grabbed Wu's neck with his 5 fingers. She had no choice but to open her mouth, and a pill was immediately sent into her mouth. Tang Zheng turned pale with fright and said, "What did you feed her? I don't trust you, so of course I have to leave a backup plan." The imperial tutor said sternly, "She ate the heart-devouring pill. If there is no antidote, her heart will be devoured, and she will die from bleeding from her 7 orifices." Tang Zheng's face was ashen as he gritted his teeth and said, "You are too ruthless." "Hee, thank you for the compliment. However, as long as you obediently tell me what I want, she will not die. I will give her the antidote." Tang Zheng's anger surged out. The imperial tutor was indeed an old fox. He was actually able to counter every move and grab onto Tang Zheng's life. "Don't use your life to threaten me. If you still want to play tricks, I won't take the things in your mind. According to my information, you are not the only cultivator in Huaxia. The cultivators are already gradually rising. It won't be too difficult for me to find someone to replace you." Tang Zheng already had no way out. "All right, then let her go first. I'll go over and let you do whatever you want with me." Tang Zheng walked towards the state preceptor again. The state preceptor unsealed Wu's acupoints and smiled as he released his hand and said, "Sure." Wu regained his freedom, his eyes filled with tears. He kept shaking his head and said, "No, why are you so stupid? I am not worth your life." Tang Zheng took 2 steps forward and arrived in front of Wu, pulling her over. Wu threw himself into her embrace and sobbed. "I won't allow you to go over. Don't go over. My life is not worth you paying so much." Tang Zheng caressed her tear-stained cheeks and revealed a brilliant smile. "Don't be silly. You have to live well and live on strong." Wu looked at him. The two of them were about the same height. Their eyes met, full of affection. She shook her head like a rattle drum and said resolutely, "Without you, can I still live in this world?" Tang Zheng's face turned cold and said, "Be good. Don't let my sacrifice go to waste. You have to take good care of my grandfather in the future." This time, Tang Zheng was determined to die, because this time there would no longer be a miracle. The gap between him and the state preceptor was too great. It was like a chasm that could not be bridged. Moreover, Wu's life was in the hands of the state preceptor, so he had no room to resist. If Tian Chanzi was here, he would definitely scold him for being muddle-headed. How could he give up his life for a woman? This was too muddle-headed, too unwise. But Tang Zheng was not Tian Chanzi. He had his own principles and bottom line. If Wu could give up his life for her, then he could do the same. If you still want her to live, then don't be so wishy-washy. The state preceptor impatiently urged. Tang Zheng pushed Marshall away, causing Marshall to shake her head in pain, but seeing the determination in Tang Zheng's eyes, she understood that there was no turning back. Things had already reached this point, and the wood had already become a boat. She choked with sobs, looked into Tang Zheng's eyes, and said firmly, "I will definitely take good care of grandfather." With that, he raised his face and kissed Tang Zheng on the lips. Like a dragonfly skimming the surface of the water, it separated with a single touch. However, it was as if they had been electrocuted. Their eyes met, and they could see something different in each other's eyes. The two of them had already had skin-to-skin contact, But this simple kiss contained a deep affection that far surpassed the previous intimate contact between the two of them. This was because the two of them had completely different states of mind. Tang Zheng pulled Wu back and resolutely walked towards the state preceptor. The state preceptor's face was filled with excitement as he clenched his fists tightly together. The moment he had been waiting for had finally arrived. Suddenly, the sound of something tearing through the air broke his good mood. A sharp arrow flew through the air and shot towards him. The arrow shone with a cold light, containing an extremely great power. The state preceptor recognized this arrow. Wasn't this the arrow that Tang Zheng had used earlier? But didn't Tang Zheng not make the slightest movement? Where did this arrow come from? He immediately turned his head to look in the direction of the arrow and saw a familiar person, Li Xiaotian. She was holding an iron bow and aiming it at him. The state preceptor was furious. This little girl actually dared to attack him. He had let her go because of the Li Palace, but she still had the guts to do so. The state preceptor was furious. The broken sword in his hand immediately slashed towards the sun-shooting arrow. Clang! The sun-shooting arrow shot towards the ground, unable to harm the state preceptor in the slightest. Umph! You dare to make a fool of yourself with such insignificant skills. Even if you are the holy maiden of the Li Palace, you can forget about leaving this place today. The state preceptor roared and reached out to grab Tang Zheng. The situation had changed, and he did not want the cooked duck to fly away. As long as Tang Zheng fell into his hands, even if Tang Zheng wanted to commit suicide, he would not be able to do so. Then his goal would have been achieved. But things did not go as he wished. The heavens were not helping him. Just as he reached out, the sun-shooting arrow on the ground flew up again and shot towards his chest. This unforeseen event shocked him. He had never expected that the sun-shooting arrow, which had lost its threat, would suddenly fly up again. With Li Xiaotian's cultivation, he did not have the ability to control an arrow through the air. But the facts were the best proof. There was no room for falsehood. The threat of the sun-shooting arrow shooting towards his chest multiplied, making it impossible for him to ignore it. He couldn't even raise his broken sword to block it. Retreat. He only had this one path. Thus, he retreated. With this retreat, the distance between him and Tang Zheng was once more widened. A person appeared between him and Tang Zheng like a whirlwind, grabbing Tang Zheng's hand and urgently shouting, "Let's go." This person was Li Xiaotian. Tang Zheng hesitated. Marshall's life was still in the hands of the state preceptor. If he left just like that, wouldn't Marshall not be able to live? Moreover, how could Li Xiaotian be so kind as to save him? Could it be another conspiracy? He really felt a little scared. Li Xiaotian's cunning image had already entered his heart, and he did not dare to believe it so easily. Li Xiaotian only took a glance at him and saw through his thoughts. He immediately said, "I'm here to save you. I have a way to save Marshall." Hearing that, Tang Zheng no longer hesitated. He turned around and ran. At the same time, he grabbed Marshall's hand. Like a headless fly, he ran away with large strides. Li Xiaotian angrily stomped his feet, cursing in his heart. "You ran faster than me, but you still foolishly sent yourself to death. What a complete idiot." She also hurriedly chased after him. The three of them ran as fast as lightning. Seeing this, the state preceptor was so angry that smoke almost came out of his 7 orifices. He shouted loudly, "Stop right there. I will kill all of you. None of you will be left alive." The three of them were not idiots, so they did not stop. Instead, they ran even faster, and the sun-shooting arrow had long since been taken back by Li Xiaotian. The state preceptor had already discovered that the tail of the sun-shooting arrow had a thin thread that was hard to see with the naked eye. That was why Li Xiaotian was able to control it from afar and catch him off guard. This is the Imperial Preceptor's mansion. There are formations set up by the Imperial Preceptors. Let's see where you can run to. The state preceptor was not in a hurry to chase after them because he believed that the thick fog could trap the three of them. They had already arrived at the narrow path that they came in from. In front of them was the thick fog. Li Xiaotian followed the pattern and pressed a command medallion into the whirlpool. Originally, The dense fog should have dissipated and an exit should have appeared. However, this time, there was no reaction at all. Tang Zheng secretly cursed and said, "Your command medallion has lost its effectiveness. Hi, you guys run. In this Imperial Preceptor's mansion, without my permission, you guys won't be able to fly out even if you have wings." The State Preceptor laughed sinisterly. The three of them looked at each other in dismay. At the last moment, such a situation had occurred. Could it be that the heavens wanted them to die? However, the three of them were not people who would give up so easily. Seeing that the State Preceptor had caught up, the three of them turned around and rushed to the side. "Hee, continue to run. Once you're exhausted, you won't need me to do anything," the State Preceptor said calmly. Whoosh whoosh, the wind whistled in their ears. The three of them did not dare to stop and rushed forward with all their might. Suddenly, a bamboo forest appeared in front of him. Tang Zheng was overjoyed. With an obstacle, he could effectively delay the State Preceptor. Thus, without any hesitation, he pulled Wu's hand and took the lead to rush into the bamboo forest. When Li Xiaotian saw the bamboo forest, a thought flashed through his mind. He immediately realized where he was and subconsciously stopped in his tracks. He blurted out, "Don't go in." However, it was already too late. Tang Zheng and Wu rushed in without hesitation, completely ignoring her words. She stomped her feet hatefully and said, "A dog biting Lu Dongbin, you don't know how to appreciate kindness. I can be considered to have been killed by you guys." Turning her head to look, the State Preceptor had already caught up. She did not dare to stay any longer. With a gust of wind under her feet, she also rushed into the bamboo forest. This bamboo forest was of course the sword forest that had caused her to suffer a loss. That was why she was so afraid. She was very clear that there were too many strange things in this sword forest, and this was also an important place in the State Preceptor's mansion. If she were to barge in, wouldn't she be like a sheep walking into a tiger's den, walking right into a trap? However, Tang Zheng's actions made her unable to think about all of this. She chased after them as fast as lightning. Looking at the two of them holding hands, she felt that it was especially dazzling. Thus, she said snappily, "Are you guys courting death? This is the sword forest of the State Preceptor's mansion. If we rush in, what if we encounter danger?" "Sword forest?" Tang Zheng raised his thick eyebrows. "What do you mean?" Chapter 684. Sword Forest. If you barge in, you won't be able to leave? Tang Zheng subconsciously thought of the array formation outside the witch tribe in the 10,000 huge mountains. Didn't it also cause people to lose their way? This is definitely a type of array formation. It's just that you're not proficient in these things, so you lost your way. Tang Zheng said solemnly. "You have a way?" Tang Zheng did not say too much and said, "Let's take one step at a time. In any case, it's much better than facing the Imperial Advisor." Li Xiaotian thought about it and agreed. The Imperial Advisor would not let them go, although they would lose their way in the Sword Forest. But wasn't there still Tang Zheng? His identity as a cultivator might be able to turn danger into safety. "Marshal, how are you feeling?" Tang Zheng turned his head to look, but did not see any trace of the Imperial Advisor, so he asked with concern. "I'm fine." Marshal's breathing was somewhat hurried, his face flushed red. Tang Zheng touched her forehead and said, "Your forehead is so hot." Li Xiaotian, "Didn't you say that you have the antidote?" A trace of panic flashed across Li Xiaotian's eyes, and he stammered, No. What?" Tang Zheng turned pale with fright. "You actually lied to me again." Tang Zheng was so angry that his eyes widened. This Li Xiaotian really did not change his nature. He actually lied to him at this critical moment. Furthermore, this concerned Marshal's life. "You." Tang Zheng's eyes were sharp and his hands were fast. He fiercely grabbed onto Li Xiaotian's collar. "You want to kill you?" Li Xiaotian squeezed out a smile and said jokingly, "I saved you, but you want to kill me. Is this how you repay me for saving your life? You are harming Wu's life. If I don't kill you, do I have to thank you?" Tang Zheng was furious. He blamed himself for being too naive, to actually believe her nonsense. Li Xiaotian was not afraid and continued. Do you think that if you hand yourself over to the Imperial Advisor, he will really give Wu the antidote? You're too naive. What kind of person is the State Preceptor? How could he just watch her leave? Both of you are already on his death list. He's just trying to trick you into submission. Tang Zheng was slightly startled. He had also thought of this at that time, but for that slim chance of survival, he had to take this risk. He had no other choice. Looks like you know this as well. You're just deceiving yourself. If I hadn't deceived you, would you have obediently turned around and fled? For her, you will definitely continue to hand yourself over to the State Preceptor without hesitation. At that time, both of you will be finished, and the State Preceptor will be the final winner. Do you really want to see this scene? Li Xiaotian continued to chatter. Tang Zheng was speechless. If you want to kill me, then kill me. In any case, I'm not your match. However, in the future, others will say that you, Tang Zheng, are ungrateful and actually want to kill your own savior. Li Xiaotian pretended to be carefree and said. Tang Zheng's expression kept changing as he glared fiercely at Li Xiaotian. His gaze was as if he wanted to cut her into 1,000 pieces. Li Xiaotian, however, was not afraid at all. He raised his head and stared at him with a burning gaze. Tang Zheng was in a mess. He really didn't know what to do. Without the antidote, wouldn't Wu's life be in danger? If he went out and surrendered now, would he be able to exchange for the antidote? He immediately rejected this absurd idea. Forget about what the State Preceptor was thinking at the beginning. With the State Preceptor's personality, how could he give him the antidote? Therefore, this had already become a dead end. Suddenly, a hand was placed on Tang Zheng's arm. Marshall looked at him affectionately, shook his head, and said, "Don't kill her. She did the right thing. You can't sacrifice yourself for me." Tang Zheng was about to refute when Marshall's finger pressed down on his lips and continued, "Don't say it, I understand. This is fate. I accept it." After saying that, he turned to stare at Li Xiaotian and said, "Although I hate you, I have to thank you this time. Thank you for helping me out just now, so that everything can still be salvaged and not slipping into an irreparable abyss." Li Xiaotian laughed. "Tang Zheng, it seems that women are more reasonable than you." Tang Zheng coldly snorted and hatefully released his fingers. Li Xiaotian regained his freedom, tidied up his clothes, and said, "Let's not be in a hurry to blame who is right and who is wrong. Leaving this place first is the most important thing." Tang Zheng turned a deaf ear and asked Marshall gently, "Can you hold on?" "I'm fine," Marshall said quickly. Tang Zheng frowned and grabbed Marshall's hand. What kind of person was Marshall? She was a pre-celestial martial artist, so the running just now definitely wouldn't cause her breathing to become so chaotic. There must be a problem. "I'm fine." Marshall wanted to break free from Tang Zheng's hand, but his hand was like a vice. How could she break free? She was very clear about the situation with her body. In fact, she had already felt that something was wrong. There was a faint pain in her chest, and she was unable to breathe. This kind of situation had never happened before, so it was obvious that the heart-devouring pill had begun to take effect. The Imperial Advisor said that after the heart-devouring pill took effect, it would devour her heart, causing her to bleed to death from all 7 orifices. She was not afraid of death, but she did not want to drag Tang Zheng down, nor did she want him to see her miserable death. She hoped that the image she left in Tang Zheng's eyes was beautiful. "Don't move, let me check." Tang Zheng channeled his innate qi, and threads of innate qi flowed along her meridians towards her body. When the innate qi reached her chest, Tang Zheng couldn't help but feel a bit of heartache, because he could clearly see the scar on her chest, which was caused by the Fire King of the Dragon Group in the Northwest Desert. Not only her chest, but her hands were also injured by the flames, leaving behind scars. Tian Chanzi had once said that this kind of scar could be removed bit by bit with innate qi, but it was not a short period of time. After Marshall obtained the Fire Underworld palm, he was engrossed in cultivation and did not come to Tang Zheng to remove the scar. Therefore, after delaying again and again, she still had this shocking scar on her body. Seeing the strange expression on Tang Jing's face, Wu immediately guessed what she was thinking. He subconsciously looked at his chest, as if he could see the ugly scar through his clothes. He couldn't help but feel embarrassed. As the innate chi flowed, it immediately made a new discovery. Tang Jing's heart couldn't help but tighten, as if it was being ruthlessly grabbed by someone. How could this be? Outside her heart, there was a black thing wriggling, as if it had a life of its own. It extended its tentacles and attached itself to her heart. Every time her heart beat, dark red blood would flow along those tentacles to that black thing. What the hell is this? Tang Jing turned pale with fright, as this scene was too shocking for him. What's wrong? Seeing Tang Jing's ashen face, Wu asked curiously. Tang Jing shook his head and said, "Nothing, don't move." Tang Jing could conclude that this thing was caused by the heart-devouring pill. The Imperial advisor said that he could devour her heart, and it seemed that what he said was true. This damn thing was not just absorbing the blood from her heart bit by bit, it was not impossible for it to devour her heart in the future. That thing was alive, which made Tang Jing think of a legendary spell, the Gu Technique. The Gu Technique was a very mysterious spell. Even in the original Cultivation world, very few people knew this spell, and those who were proficient in it were even rarer. Just now, the heart-devouring pill must have contained a goo worm. When Wu consumed it, the goo worm was awakened and attached itself to her heart. If there was no antidote, the goo worm would completely awaken and then slowly devour Wu's heart, completely killing her. In addition, if the goo technique was cultivated to the extreme, one could use these goo worms to control a person's consciousness and use them as puppets. The State Preceptor's heart-devouring pill obviously doesn't have the ability to control the host, but it's not difficult to kill her. Damn, the Imperial Preceptor's mansion actually has such a weird thing. It seems that ninjutsu is not completely useless. In the past, the island nation stole a lot of good things from Huaxia. Tang Jing thought indignantly. Even so, he did not intend to compromise. He was prepared to try and see if he could help her get rid of this damn thing. Hearing that, Wu's body slightly stiffened. He took a deep breath and held his breath as he looked deeply at Tang Jing. He knew that he was going to heal her. Her true chi flowed to the outside of the cluster of goo worms. Suddenly, the goo worms shook as if they were stimulated. Those tentacles quickly grew and drilled into her heart. Wu's facial muscles immediately contorted as he screamed in pain. Beads of sweat dripped down from his forehead like rain. Tang Jing was shocked and quickly asked, "Marshal, what's wrong with you?" I'm fine." Wu clenched his teeth and held on, but in an instant, he opened his mouth and let out a mournful scream. Tang Jing saw those tentacles crazily drilling into Marshal's heart, and Tang Jing's heart felt as if it had been ruthlessly stabbed by a knife. He already understood the power of this goo worm, and although his true chi was powerful, it would definitely have a harmful effect on the goo worm. It was precisely because the goo worm had sensed danger that it would counterattack without any regard for its life. If Tang Jing continued, perhaps the goo worm would die, but Wu's heart would also be devoured by the goo worm. In that case, everything would lose its meaning. Tang Jing unwillingly withdrew his innate chi. As expected, those tentacles stopped moving and did not continue to drill into Wu's heart. However, they were still greedily sucking the blood from the heart. At this moment, those tentacles had already wrapped around half of the heart, and the speed at which they absorbed the blood became even faster. Wu stopped screaming and gasped for breath. His face turned from red to pale as he asked weakly, "How is it?" Tang Jing's face was gloomy as he resolutely said, "I will definitely think of a way to cure your poison." Wu was dejected. Since he said so, then the situation was especially serious. She looked deeply at Tang Jing, squeezed out a smile, and said, "It doesn't matter. Life and death are fated. I'm not afraid." Chapter 685. Li Xiaotian looked at the two of them clasped hands and Tang Zheng's resolute eyes. In a trance, she actually had an impulse to change to martial. However, the wolf quickly gained the upper hand. She said seriously, "If you don't leave this place, you won't be able to cure her wholeheartedly. Therefore, leaving this place is the most important thing." Tang Zheng glanced at her from the corner of his eyes, supported Marshall, and walked forward. Li Xiaotian knew that his image in Tang Zheng's eyes had once again fallen, so he followed without saying a word. As far as the eye could see, there were many green bamboos that pierced the sky. The three of them had already walked for a period of time, but the bamboo forest seemed to have no end. Li Xiaotian said worriedly, "The last time I encountered this situation, it was also very strange. Moreover, these bamboos are very strange. Even my arrows can't break them." Tang Zheng was shocked and asked, "Really?" Li Xiaotian nodded his head heavily. Tang Zheng reached out and stroked the green bamboo. It was no different from ordinary bamboo, but why was it so stubborn? Even Li Xiaotian's arrow could not harm it in the slightest. "How is it?" Li Xiaotian asked. Tang Zheng did not say a word. His figure flashed, and he began to wander around the bamboo forest. His fingers would occasionally tap on the green bamboo. Li Xiao 5, Tian, and Marshall looked at him nervously, not knowing what the result would be. Suddenly, Tang Zheng stopped in his tracks. His brows were tightly knitted as he said, "This is an array formation. Is there a way to get out?" Li Xiaotian asked anxiously. "Ha, you want to go out? Once you enter the sword forest, you will be a puppet in my hands at my mercy. You still want to go out? You must be dreaming." An arrogant laughter suddenly came from the sky. If it was not the imperial advisor, who else could it be? The three of them were shocked. Tang Zheng immediately stood in front of Marshall to protect him. Li Xiaotian glanced at him and could not help but turn pale. The three of them looked up at the sky at the same time. Other than the bamboo forest, there was not a single ghost in sight. "You don't have to look for me. If I don't show myself, you won't be able to find me." The state preceptor obviously knew their actions like the back of his hand. He said proudly, "How was the taste of the poison?" "Tang Zheng, this is all your fault. You killed her, haha." "Nonsense," Marshall retorted loudly. "All of this is your scheme." "Heh, you still have the strength to refute me. You do have some perseverance. But soon, you will run out of strength. You can only lie on the ground and beg for mercy. In the end, you will bleed from your 7 orifices and die. That feeling, I am afraid I will not forget even if I become a ghost." Marshall's expression changed slightly as she faintly felt the pain in her heart increase. The goo worm was causing more and more damage to her. "Shut up." Seeing Marshall's reaction, Tang Zheng flew into a rage and roared. The war soul in his hand fiercely slashed forward. Whoosh! The sword light swept across the green bamboo in front of him, causing it to immediately bend down and lie on the ground. However, it quickly bounced back and stood proudly. Seeing this scene with their own eyes, whether it was Tang Zheng or Marshall, they were all in disbelief. How could these green bamboos be so strange? That sword strike just now was enough to split open stones, so why was it unable to harm these seemingly weak bamboos? Feel free to vent your anger. Let's see if you can hurt my sword forest." The state preceptor laughed sinisterly. "I don't believe in this evil." Tang Zheng went crazy. The war soul in his hand danced like a tiger. The sword light covered the sky and covered the earth like an inescapable net, everywhere, slashing onto the green bamboo. In that instant, the bamboo leaves fluttered and the green bamboo bent. This small world was filled with berserk air currents, but when Tang Zheng stopped, the green bamboo all bounced back, not a single one breaking. "Hoo-hoo!" Tang Zheng gasped for breath as he looked around in disbelief. This was completely beyond his imagination. What kind of ghost sword forest is this? Tang Zheng roared hysterically. The state preceptor's complacent laughter came from the sky, as if he was mocking Tang Zheng. Marshall's face became paler and paler, her eyes revealing a pained expression. Seeing Tang Zheng like this, her heart really ached. Li Xiaotian said calmly, The Sword Forest is an important place in the state preceptor's residence for people to comprehend sword techniques. Ordinary disciples do not have the qualifications to enter. Only those who have cultivated to a certain level have the qualifications. Yesterday, Junko came out of the Sword Forest, and then her strength increased greatly. I suspect that she comprehended a new sword technique in the Sword Forest. Comprehending sword techniques. Tang Zheng was startled. He looked around. What did these green bamboos have to do with sword techniques? I don't cultivate sword techniques, so I'm not very clear about the way of the sword, so I can't tell if this news is true or false. Li Xiaotian said regretfully. Tang Zheng, on the other hand, calmed down. Didn't he train in sword techniques? Moreover, the heaven-flying immortal sword technique was a very powerful set of sword techniques. Since Junko could comprehend sword techniques in the Sword Forest, why couldn't he? He calmed down the anger in his heart, and his heart calmed down bit by bit. He simply closed his eyes, circulated his innate qi, and released his senses. Suddenly, he felt a trace of strangeness. The green bamboos disappeared and were replaced by streaks of sword qi. The sword qi pierced the sky and stood proudly. An indescribable, mysterious aura lingered in the Sword Forest. He seemed to have realized that the green bamboos were all illusions. Their true colors were streaks of sword qi. No wonder weapons were unable to harm them in the slightest, because they did not have a physical body. The green bamboos were just illusions. Who exactly thought of this method to actually condense so much sword qi? Comprehending sword techniques in this kind of environment is indeed twice the result with half the effort. Every blade of grass and tree here was compatible with the way of the sword. As long as one used their heart to sense it, coupled with a certain amount of talent and cultivation as a foundation, it would not be difficult to comprehend sword techniques. When he quietly sensed the sword qi, the innate qi in his body involuntarily sped up. The heaven-flying immortal's sword technique also began to circulate on its own. He subconsciously raised the War Soul Sword. Swish! Sword light flashed, and the War Soul Sword drew a beautiful sword light in the air. Wind rising, clouds surging. Although Tang Zheng still had his eyes closed, he still recognized this sword move. The innate qi quickly circulated according to the path of the heaven-flying immortal's sword technique. This sword move was naturally used, completely out of his control. It was as if something had triggered the heaven-flying immortal's sword technique. His heart suddenly became clear. It must be because of this sword forest. Other people could comprehend sword techniques here, but the heaven-flying immortal's sword technique was too high level. He did not need to spend too much effort to comprehend it. The sword forest naturally triggered this point. Immediately, he swept away the dejection and bad luck from before and became spirited. He quietly felt the changes in his body. The heaven-flying immortals had a total of 6 moves, and each move had 36 moves. It was incomparably complicated and varied. Previously, he had only cultivated to the 5th move, Return to Origin. He had not even touched the threshold of the 6th move. The 6th move was the peak of this sword technique. Of course, it was not easy to cultivate. The innate qi was still circulating rapidly in his meridians, and the War Soul Sword in his hand still did not stop. Sword breaking 10,000 caddies. The 2nd move of the heaven-flying immortals. Next, 3rd move, Lightning Fire Sword. 4th move, Heaven Falls and Earth Rends. 5th move, Return to Origin. The innate qi still did not stop. Tang Zheng felt like he was a balloon. The innate qi had already filled his entire body and was about to explode. The War Soul Sword was completed in one go, and these 5 moves were unleashed in an instant. Puff, puff, puff. The green bamboo was slashed by the sword again and again, and then it quickly returned to its original appearance. Tang Zheng seemed to be still doing useless work. Wu and Li Xiaotian looked at him worriedly, but seeing that he was immersed in it, they did not say anything to disturb him. Only the two of them clenched their hands tightly. their palms drenched in cold sweat. The Imperial advisor's laughter was still deafening, continuously ridiculing Tang Zheng for overestimating himself and only knowing how to do such useless work. The war soul sword danced faster and faster, the sword light intertwining, becoming denser and denser. The Imperial advisor's smile gradually weakened, and in the end, it disappeared without a trace. What replaced it was a cry of alarm. "What are you doing?" Of course, Tang Zheng would not answer him. He just kept on waving the war soul sword, causing the true qi in his meridians to circulate even faster. Traces of enlightenment appeared in his mind. A gust of wind suddenly blew in the sword forest. This gust of wind rose from the soles of Tang Zheng's feet and soared upwards, causing the bamboo leaves to flutter and the green bamboos to sway with the wind. "Stop!" the Imperial advisor roared, and a figure suddenly appeared not far away, rushing over with lightning speed. Seeing that, Wu and Li Xiaotian rushed forward at the same time. The sun-shooting arrow pierced through the air and shot straight towards the Imperial advisor. Wu's palms turned fiery red, and the fire underworld palm once again displayed its might. The sword light flashed, and the broken sword in the Imperial advisor's hand exploded with a resplendent light. The sun-shooting arrow flew back, and after the fire underworld god's palm struck the broken sword, the huge recoil caused her to quickly retreat. The two of them worked together, but were unable to stop the Imperial advisor. However, they were very clear that since the Imperial advisor was so nervous, it must be because Tang Zheng had gained something. They had to stop the Imperial advisor from getting close to Tang Zheng, even if they had to risk their lives. Thus, the two of them charged forward once again. "Since you're courting death, I'll fulfill your wish," the Imperial advisor roared. Ding Dang shouted, and a sword light slashed into the void at the tail of the sun-shooting arrow. The thin thread that was hard to see with the naked eye was cut off, and the sun-shooting arrow's attack decreased sharply. After being blocked by the broken sword, it flew out diagonally. Li Xiaotian leaped into the air, wanted to catch the sun-shooting arrow. This was her treasure, the divine weapon that she had obtained from Tang Zheng with great difficulty. She could not lose it just like that. The Imperial advisor saw through her thoughts. With a flash of sword light, the broken sword blocked her path, and even the iron bow in her hand was cut into two. Li Xiaotian immediately retreated, barely dodging the attack. Looking at the iron bow in her hand that was broken into two pieces, she could not help but reveal a look of regret. Although this iron bow could not compare to the heaven-shocking bow, it was still a rare weapon. You ate the heart-devouring pill, and you're still so brave. This is truly unexpected. However, without my antidote, you won't be able to hold on for long. I won't kill you. I'll torture you to death. The Imperial advisor stared at Wu and laughed sinisterly. Whoosh whoosh. The Inferno Nether Divine Palm was like a tiger as it attacked the Imperial Preceptor. However, the Imperial Preceptor did not meet force with force. Instead, he dodged to the side and sneered. "You are digging your own grave. The more you circulate, the faster the poison will take effect. I don't need to do anything. You won't be able to last long." You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.